Donald Wee Gaskins was truly a monster. He was a cold-blooded, sadistic rapist who first sexually assaulted a girl when he wasn't yet 13 years old himself. He was a serial killer and alleged cannibal from the state of South Carolina. He killed 10 confirmed victims, but confessed to more than 100 murders, the majority of which have never been verified. In a 331-page statement, Gaskins described acts of murder, rape, and torture as casually as most people talk about what they had for breakfast. He claimed he laced his soda with acid and watched as his victim drank it, beat his own niece to death, and drowned a pregnant woman and her baby. These are just a few of the brutal acts he admitted to before his execution in 1991. But in the autobiography published after his death, he confessed to much more disturbing details of his crimes. At one point, Pee-wee was known as the meanest man in America. He claimed to have killed for many reasons: money, to save himself from going back to prison, revenge and personal vendettas, fits of rage, but mostly he killed thanks to a deep-rooted desire to rape, torture, and murder young women, which Pee-wee called his bothersomeness. He claimed that every time he felt those bothersome urges, he went hunting on the highways along South Carolina's coast, looking for lone female hitchhikers to brutalize. Was Wee Gaskins one of the most prolific serial killers in American history? Or was he a liar who was also still one of the most sadistic monsters you will ever hear about? This week, we'll cover the life and crimes of Wee Gaskins, his coastal kills, and his, quote, serious murders. We'll compare what credible sources have to say about him to what he claimed was his final truth in another serial killer, morbid escapist. Be oh so glad that the lives of so many of the characters in this story, including Pee-wee's, are not your own edition of Timesuck.
This is Michael McDonald, and you're listening to Timesuck.
You're listening to Timesuck.
Well, happy Monday and welcome back to the Cult of the Curious. I'm Dan Cummins, Suckmaster, podcaster who hopes he has not been compromised by Russian propagandists, Soviet cheese meat nourishment held in solidarity by strong, selfless comrade, bread lover, and you are listening to Timesuck. Hail Nimrod, hail Lucifina, praise be to good boy Bojangles, and glory be to Triple M. Recording this before those Nashville Comedy Festival shows I've been talking about, hoping they went well. Thanks to anyone who came out to those shows. And now a quick summer camp announcement. Very excited. The third Bad Magic Wet Hot Summer Camp is coming up September 4th through the 7th in upstate New York, Pennsylvania. And I wanted to announce Friday night's comedy show lineup for this year. Besides me, I'll host it again. We have my buddy Josh Wolf, host of the Hey Man podcast, multiple YouTube specials you should check out, and more, along with his son, comic Jacob Wolf, co-host of the Hey Man podcast. Oh, man, I've known Josh for a long time. We'll have another friend, one of my favorite comics working today, New Orleans' own Sean Patton, one of the stars of the FX sitcom The English Teacher. He has a stand-up special #1, been out on Peacock, going to be out on YouTube here in a few days as well. Also have another friend, the incredible Tone Bell from countless sitcoms, known him forever as well, the Netflix shows Drink Masters and Survival of the Thickest. And, of course, one of my best buds, comic Doug Mellard, who was at the first two summer camps. Tickets still available at badmagicproductions.com if you want to join the hundreds already attending. It's an all-inclusive weekend of food, booze, tons of camp activities, karaoke, stand-up, a live podcast, and more. Just an awesome community of people coming together for a weird weekend in the woods. Again, get the details at badmagicproductions.com. September 4th through 7th. Technically in Pennsylvania, but people call it upstate New York. And leave the rest of the world behind for a few memorable days. And finally, rest in peace to Val Kilmer, who passed away back on April 1st. And sadly, the announcement of his death, not an April Fool's joke. Truly can't imagine not having his portrayal of Doc Holliday in Tombstone in my life. My favorite on-screen character ever. Mr. I'll Be Your Huckleberry himself. Hope he's in a better place. And now it's topic time. Boy, is it ever. If you like past topics like Albert Fish and Ed Kemper, I think you're going to like this one. If you can also handle the level of graphic detail covered in previous episodes about like the Kansas City Butcher, the Toy Box Killer, whew, there's going to be a couple passages that are fucking rough. This guy was so weird, so unintentionally hilarious in moments based on how he spoke and based on what he wrote in his autobiography. I'll do a little voice for him, and then I'll play some audio from him towards the end and be like, oh, that wasn't as cartoonish as I might have thought. But also he's the fucking personification of evil. It's so cold-blooded and sexually sadistic with some of his crimes. He really wanted you to believe. He truly was the meanest man in America. And I think for a time, he at least tied some other dirtbags for that horrific title. So buckle up. Pee-wee might have had a goofy name and been a tiny little guy, but he reached a giant level of darkness and debauchery. Okay, no introduction needed before diving into today's fucking insane and horrific timeline, which will cover Wee Gaskin's life and many crimes, so many crimes, comparing his own statements, information from modern sources, and newspaper archives. Here we go.
Strap on those boots, soldier. We're marching down a Timesuck timeline.
Donald Henry Gaskins, who will be known by his nickname of Pee-wee, thanks to his diminutive stature. As a full-grown man, he would never be bigger than about 5'2" and around 130 pounds, soaking wet. Was born on March 31st, 1933 in a very rural area known as Prospect. It's a place you will not find on Google Maps, or maybe on any maps at all, unless you look for Prospect Crossroads, South Carolina. Very tiny little backwoods farming community in Florence County between Lake City and Johnsonville, much closer to Johnsonville, only 6 miles away. Johnsonville is pretty rural too. Only about 1,300 people live there today, and back in 1933, when Pee-wee was born, the number was closer to just about 300. If you zoom in on the map around Prospect Crossroads today, you will not find much. I imagine there had to have been quite a bit less when Pee-wee lived there. There's a Dollar General, a Prospect Pentecostal Holiness Church, a Prospect Independent Methodist Church, B&M Well Drilling, and Pam's Prospect Grocery, and that's about it. According to local guide Greg Parker, Pam's Grocery has just about everything you need, though. Friendly, joking atmosphere. They got fresh produce, lots of boxed goods, hot dogs, fucking top notch. And you can even grab a bucket of crickets to go fishing with while you're there. Most of the reviewers rave about this place's hot dogs, which are only $2. This area reminds me a lot of where I grew up in Idaho. Pee-wee said about the place he grew up in his autobiography, Final Truth, "It's mainly farms and woods, backwaters and swamp, and little towns with names like Lake City and Johnsonville, and other spots not hardly big enough to be put on a map. Prospect and Leo, Roper's Crossroads in the Neck, is a good place to lead my kind of life, with lots of places to bury bodies." That is kind of how this guy talks. That's as best as I can do. Thank you, Pee-wee. A great place to grab a delicious, cheap, and cheerful hot dog to enjoy after you've worked up a hearty appetite, burying bodies in a swamp. Pee-wee's mother was Yulia Parrott. She went by Yulie. She was 21 when Pee-wee was born. Yulie lived with her parents, Lewis and Fanny Parrott, local farmers who grew up in the community. The Gaskins family owned the land they lived on, and there was all kinds of Gaskins around this area, but they worked on a larger farm nearby to make additional needed money. The Parrott family were described as decent, church-going, hard-working folks. It seems they were members of the local Pentecostal church, and Pee-wee was the black sheep. Pee-wee believed that his father, he was born out of wedlock. His dad was never in the picture. To be a prosperous, esteemed farmer and business owner named Donald Henry Gaskins, his namesake, which would make him a junior. If this guy for sure is his actual dad. Henry Gaskins was married, had children. It's not known if he really was Pee-wee's biological father. Pee-wee wrote that his mom was only 15 when he was born, which is definitely not true, based on her obituary. Again, she was 22. Pee-wee not always big on accuracy when it came to details of his life and exploits, as you will see. He wrote that his dad, Donald Henry Gaskins, paid his mom child support until she later married one of Pee-wee's stepfathers. His mom later would tell Pee-wee, though, that the reason Gaskins Sr. Gave her money was so she wouldn't tell anyone he was the father of her baby. This dude's childhood was the epitome of rural poverty and backwoods dysfunction in many ways. Yulie dated a lot of different dudes from around the area when Pee-wee was a young child, apparently. He said he never bothered to learn their names because he figured they weren't going to stick around for very long. Numerous sources have said that while Yulie did not abuse her son directly, that she did likely neglect him and not make sure he wasn't being abused by anyone else. Pee-wee wrote about his childhood in his Pee-wee way. Being born on a farm, I know the difference between raising something and it just growing. You raise tobacco and vegetables to harvest, and pigs and sheep to butcher. They got purpose. You tend them. Weeds grow on their own, tended or not. I grew. I wasn't raised. That's for damn sure. Hell, I didn't know my own real name till I was a teenager and got sentenced at the reformatory. Up until then, at home and at school, my name had always been Junior Parrot. Everybody everywhere called me Junior or Pee-wee Parrot, which made sense to me because my mama's name was Parrot as far as I knew. My whole family was named Parrot, except for my stepdaddies. That's fucking wild if true. If he didn't know his first or last legal name until he was a teenager. Gaskins claimed not to have many memories from his early childhood, but we do have info on something his mother later recalled. She was interviewed about her son's mental health in 1964 while he was in prison, one of his many stints. I'll read you an excerpt here. The patient's mother said the patient did have a lot of physical difficulties as a young child. When he was about a year old, he drank some kerosene and almost died. The doctor who treated him said his nerves would be bad for the rest of his life. After this incident, the patient began to have convulsions and would remain unconscious for as long as 10 minutes at a time. Miss Hannah, Hannah was his mom's last name in 1964 when she was married to Pee-wee's stepdad. Miss Hannah said the patient had convulsions until he was about 3 years old. He had bad dreams and would often wake up in the middle of the night and be afraid. Miss Hannah said she had to sleep with him until he was about 13 years old. His mom apparently was convinced that this incident of drinking kerosene early on was the root of his later behavioral problems, which might be true. Also, as a parent, would be nice to blame something other than yourself if you have this kind of son. Kerosene, if you're not familiar with it, is a clear, flammable hydrocarbon liquid derived from petroleum, commonly used as fuel for like lamps, stoves, heaters, that kind of shit, especially back then. Pee-wee would recall another experience from 1937 when he was 4 vividly in his autobiography. He said that most of his mom Yuli's boyfriends were, quote, tight as a preacher's asshole with their money, but one of his stepfathers took the family to see a traveling carnival that came to town one day. And Pee-wee remembered walking into the carnival, seeing a large tent painted with the image of a snake wrapped around a naked lady. Inside that tent, there were snakes in glass enclosures, an alligator, and a wire pen. And he watched a man with a megaphone tell the audience that the snake was a deadly king cobra, and then took a live rat out of a box, dropped it in the pen with the snake. Pee-wee watched as the cobra struck at the rat, and he wrote, "What took hold of my attention right then was that the cobra's head was almost exactly as high up as my head. When I looked through the glass, I was staring it straight in the eye, and my reflection looked like that cobra and me had the same head and face and eyes." Noticed, okay, interesting memory as a kid. He noticed that his mom, stepdad, and young cousin were afraid, but in his words, "I had a heart on, and I knew that what I just seen was somehow special and important, even though I didn't know why." And that's a fucking creepy thing to stand out in one's early memories. Also, no way that this snake actually gave him a fucking boner, right? He was 4. You probably get spontaneous boners at that age, baby, but I don't think you're getting fucking turned on at that age. I hope not, by a snake especially. Other than this experience, Pee-wee did not think that there was much worth remembering about growing up on a rural tobacco farm. His mom eventually married a man named Hennert Hannah, who in most sources, including Pee-wee's, is referred to as Hinnant. Not sure why sources consistently spelled this dude's name wrong. Hinnant was allegedly, according to Pee-wee, quote, "one mean son of a bitch. He used to backhand me, knock me clean across the room just for practice." Gaskin had 2 sisters, half-sisters, actually. 2 half-brothers who were born after the marriage. He had a half-brother Charles, another half-brother that is never named in his autobiography. Doesn't seem to be named in any sources, but may have been named Jesse James, based on some genealogical digging I did. And he had half-sisters Inez and Carol. Accounts of Pee-wee's childhood start to differ once his mom married Hinnant. According to the PBS Carolina Stories documentary on Gaskins, Pee-wee was actually spoiled as a child. Got whatever he wanted because everybody thought he was cute because he was so good at manipulating the adults around him. People who knew the family interviewed in the doc said his claims of abuse were categorically not true, and that the real problem was that he was overly indulged and spoiled rotten as a kid, that he wasn't disciplined enough, and never learned any real boundaries. And I'm open to believing that version for sure. One thing a lot of these killers seem to have in common is a real penchant for blaming everybody but themselves for their terrible behavior. Also, according to the PBS documentary, Pee-wee began to show signs of troubling behavior in kindergarten. He apparently, by that age, was already abusing pets and the other animals he could get his tiny little grubby hands on, doing shit like pulling legs off of frogs, killing baby birds by snapping their heads clean off. And that sounds about right, based on who he becomes later. I don't doubt that. In Final Truth, his autobiography, Pee-wee wrote that because he was so small, he was an easy target for harassment and violence from his uncles, various stepfathers, boys and girls at school and in the neighborhood. He wrote the following account about being a little guy. I guess account, this is a sentence here. Yeah. He wrote, it weren't that I was the littlest because I was the youngest. No matter how old I got, I was still littlest. He claimed other children teased him with the cruel rhyme, Pee-wee, Pee-wee, playing with your pee-pee. I mean, how could they not? Come on. It's fucking right there, resting on the tee, ready for someone to take a swing at it. I don't feel bad for him over that little teasing rhyme. My last name is Cummins. You don't think I was teased as a kid? I was also the smallest kid in my class or neighborhood, boy or girl, until high school when I finally started to grow. Yeah, I didn't grow for I don't know how long, 4 years or something. I didn't grow much before that. And then I had a crazy, huge growth spurt in high school. But yeah, I don't know, 8th grade. I was probably 5 foot or less. I don't know, somewhere around 100 pounds. Other kids had a fucking field day with my name. Cum bubble, cum stain, those are popular slurs. Canned Dummins came later. Pee-wee didn't laugh that shit off, though, or ignore it quite like I did. He became enraged. He said he finally got mad enough to lash out and hit someone, which apparently caused some other kids to gang up on him and beat the shit out of him. He got his ass beat on a number of occasions, many, many occasions, according to him. So many times, he just got used to the violence and stopped fearing it. He hated school because of this, thought it was torture. Said he eventually got into fights almost every day because of the bullying, which resulted in punishments at school. He wrote, it's no wonder I never learned jack shit. Despite his claims of frequent beatings, Pee-wee also didn't believe he was, quote, abused. He did call his home life, quote, pretty good. Said his mom was a good cook, and that despite how little money they might have had, they always had food on the table. He added that his younger siblings often spent time together listening to, or he and his younger siblings, spent time together doing stuff like listening to radio shows like The Lone Ranger, Grand Ole Opry. Well, his stepdad smoked a pipe, and his mom worked on her sewing. In an interview for a 2019 documentary called The Hitchhiker's Killer, Wee Gaskins, Pee-wee's daughter Shirley said her dad was a bad child who was always doing something he wasn't supposed to do, and that his uncles beat him because he wouldn't listen. Her statement seemingly confirmed parts of both accounts of Pee-wee's childhood. She also said that his stepdads abused him at home, and the other kids did abuse him at school. And who knows how abused or not he was. Again, Pee-wee gave a lot of conflicting statements about his life before he died. While he didn't like school, Pee-wee was interested in learning how machines work. He was very mechanically inclined, had a real talent for that. He enjoyed working on cars and radios, called himself a tinkerer. His mom used to tell people, that Pee-wee can fix anything. I guess that was her talking. I don't know why I had to have her also have Pee-wee's voice. You know what? Maybe he got his voice from hers. This mechanical talent and ability to fix anything will later lead to at least one victim's creative death towards the end of his life. Pee-wee started hanging around the mechanic shop at the filling station a few miles down the road from his house early on in his childhood. Then at the age of 11, he began to skip school to act as an errand boy for the mechanics, who he claimed would pay him a couple dollars a day. His mom was unhappy when he quit school entirely, and his stepdad told him that he had to do more farm chores if he was going to drop out. Sounds like he dropped out somewhere around 5th, 6th grade. Pee-wee told him he wanted to work on cars instead of going to school. His stepdad allegedly beat him whenever he found out he'd snuck off to work for the mechanics. And eventually, Pee-wee decided it was best just to do as he was told. As far as chores, he would do his chores, try and mind his manners, somewhat stay out of trouble. His little brothers and sisters didn't mess with him, usually nice to him when when they broke something and they wanted him to fix it. Eventually, his mom convinced his stepdad to allow him to work at the mechanics on Saturdays at least. Soon thereafter, sources don't state at exactly what age this occurred. Pee-wee, and sources are very contradictory with parts of Pee-wee's life here. Pee-wee had himself a business. On Saturdays, locals brought things like broken radios, record players, sewing machines. He'd work on them throughout the week. Pee-wee recalled that on Sunday afternoons, he would not work, though. Instead, he and some other local boys would go to a secret hideout in the woods where they would smoke cigarettes, talk about girls, and learn how to masturbate from the other boys, apparently. Also claim they learned how to have anal sex from these other boys, who sounds like they were having it with each other, and have sex with animals. Okay? His words, we sat around and smoked cigarettes, we stole and bragged about how much we knew about girls, and we watched the older boys and learned how to jerk off or cornhole or fuck a sheep or goat or chicken. I uncomfortably laughed so fucking hard when I first read that at one of the coffee shops I like to work at. It just kills me when people mention something insane like that so casually. As if that was like just a normal rite of passage. How did I learn about sex? Like pretty much everyone else, I reckon. Pretty standard rite of passage. I'd go to a hideout, you know. We'd sit there and we'd sit around, watch older boys jerk off and fuck each other's butts and fuck sheep and goats and chickens and whatnot. And then we fuck each other's butts and, you know, and help each other jerk off and, you know, and fuck chickens and stuff ourselves and, you know, that sort of normal shit. That's not normal, Pee-wee. That's not normal at all. That's some debaucherous Lord of the Flies type shit. The most trouble Pee-wee got into as a young child was when he and two older boys dug a trench at the back of the church outhouse so they could watch women and girls when they pulled down their pants to use the bathroom. When they were caught, he said, quote, 3 sets of stepdaddies, a preacher, a deacon, and 4 mamas, including my mama, joined together and tore our asses to ribbons with switches for that. You know what? That one feels a bit more normal to me. I can see getting lured into something like that as a kid myself. I never did that exactly, but me and kids from the school definitely crawled around like I was in like junior high. We crawled out under the bleachers at football games, trying to see up the skirts of our classmates' moms. In typical future serial killer fashion, girls made young Pee-wee angry. He disliked the fact that girls had something boys really wanted, pussies in particular, but wouldn't give it to them unless the boys did what they wanted. It also angered him that girls could tease him and beat him up, but yet he was the one who would be punished if he retaliated. So he starts to hate women. From a young age, he said he was also aware of some dark and disturbing urges building within him. He said, but no matter how things went, good or bad, I always felt something bothersome was a stirring inside me. It's like I had this ball of plumber's lead rolling around in my guts. Most times it lay quiet, just weighting me down. Other times it growed bigger and hotter, like it was going to explode. And once in a while I dreamed, I still do, that it blowed me apart and there was all these millions of little pieces and parts of me running around and flying around trying to find each other and put me back together. Yeah, it's pretty nuts. That's a bit concerning. When Gaskins was around 10 years old, he joined up with 2 older local boys named Danny and Marsh, who were his only real friends. They called themselves the Trouble Trio because all they did was get into trouble. And yes, they were fucking problems. This trio would begin to normalize some really fucked up shit for Pee-wee and accelerate his development into a sexual sadist. The trio's activities, started off with some fairly typical vandalism and theft. The boys did shit like break into vending machines to steal money, cigarettes, and drinks. They'd hide their loot in Pee-wee's barn until one of his sisters found it, told her mom. Pee-wee swore he was acting alone. His stepdad threatened to send him to the sheriff if he did it again. Though Pee-wee was the youngest of the trio, he became the leader after this incident because he hadn't snitched. And now he came up with ideas for them to make more money. He was inspired by one of his customers in the mechanic shop. A man who lived 8 miles away came in, told Pee-wee he had a floor model radio that was broken. It was too big to bring in. Pee-wee went to the man's house to repair it, noticed he had all kinds of valuables laying around. So Pee-wee immediately made plans to break into this guy's house, steal, and then resell those items. His friend Danny would borrow his dad's truck to drive them there. Danny's father found out about their plans, and instead of whooping some asses or doing anything else to stop him, he joins them. He offers to fence the stolen goods for them. So that's a cool dude. That's great, Dad. Pee-wee will steal shit and try to have it fenced whenever he is a free man for the rest of his life. Danny's dad instructed them to break in on a Saturday afternoon when most people were out and told them which items were most valuable and which items fences wouldn't touch. And now that's what they did. When the boys pulled off that heist and put some money in everybody's pockets, they decided to try it again at somebody else's place. They got away with it, so they did it again and again and again. For the next 2 years, the boys had a prosperous breaking and entering business. Danny's dad always paying them their share, and They saved up enough to collectively buy a 36 Ford for more heists in other towns. And the boys now took their show on the road, driving to bigger cities like Columbia and Charleston, where Pee Wee claimed he lost his virginity to a sex worker. In Pee Wee's interesting words, sometimes we headed to Columbia, to Charleston, where there was military bases and plenty of whores. That's how we all lost our pussy fuck cherries. But there was something about them whores that we didn't like. We agreed that jacking off at the hideout was almost as good. Jesus Christ. That's where we lost our, quote, pussy fuck cherries. What? Are you still virgin, Pee Wee? Not when it comes to pussy fuck cherries, I ain't. According to Pee Wee, he also began watching one of his buddies start to rape other boys around this time. Another part of his not at all normal sexual development. He said his friend Marsh, his trio member Marsh, was interested in younger boys. So, sounds like a, pedophile. And that he and Danny would watch while Marsh engaged in sexual acts with younger boys. They were curious, and then they tried it as well. And then they allowed Marsh to perform sexual acts on them whenever he asked, supposedly because he was their friend. Again, in Pee Wee's words, and my oh my, did he have a way with words. Marsh thought the hideout was better than whores. He liked cornholing the younger boys and letting them cornhole him. And he liked to suck dicks. Danny and me didn't go for that too much. Mostly we just watched, though to be honest, like most teenage boys, we tried it all once or more, and because Marsh was our friend, we would let him suck us off whenever he asked to. What the fuck? Again, he's so casual about the crazy shit, like, and just tossed it out there like, you know how boys is. Danny and I didn't go for letting little kids fuck our butts too much, because, we ain't gay, see? We just normal red-blooded men. We just thought it would be fun to watch our bud fuck some little butts, and get his butt fucked, because, we didn't have, like, a television or anything else, you understand? Did we sometimes suck each other's dicks? Did Marsh suck our dicks, like, quite often? Well, yeah, we was good friends. We was friends being friends. We red-blooded boys, and boys will be boys. What the fuck? He was no older than 13 when all this happened, by the way. Likely only 11 or 12. Pee Wee said that he and his two buddies had a hard time finding girls in town who would go out with them because they had bad reputations. Yeah. They're constantly stealing shit and sucking each other's dicks and fucking little kid butts and each other's butts. It's probably a little off-putting to grade school and junior high girls back in the 1940s. Pee Wee said that one evening the trio were out riding around when Marsh, he decided that they needed to find a virgin girl and rape her at their hideout. Yep. How is Marsh not the serial killer I'm talking about this week? What the fuck happened to Marsh? I wish his last name came up in sources. I really wanted to know where Marsh ended up. And speaking of Marsh, who did he suggest to be their rape victim? Well, none other than his 13-year-old younger sister. A girl he had his eyes on for a while. Not kidding. He said it would be easy to convince her not to tell anyone. My God. Marsh's mom agreed to let him take his little sister out for a double feature movie night one night, and that was, of course, a lie. And the boys took her instead to the hideout, where these fucking rabid animals raped her repeatedly. The world would have been so much better off if around this time some good Samaritan would have taken all three of these boys out into the swamp and drowned them and fed their bodies to some hogs. And yes, I'm very pro killing children when they are as fucked up as this trio. You don't do what these animals did and then magically become good citizens. Pee Wee's recollection of this gang rape showed the lack of care he felt for committing such violent acts. He said, even though we didn't hit her or do nothing to hurt her, she still cried and begged us to stop. Well, yeah, of course you did, you fucking psycho. You did hurt her. You gang raped her. They promised to pay Marsh's sister if she didn't tell anyone, threatened to hurt her if she did. She promised she would not tell a soul, but luckily she would. After heading to the drive-in for some burgers, the boys returned Marsh and his victimized sister to their house. Danny dropped Pee Wee off before heading home. After dinner, Pee Wee was listening to the radio with his family when Marsh's mother came barreling into the front yard. She got out of her vehicle, ran up into the house, hit Pee Wee hard enough to knock him out cold. Good on her. Wish she would have hit him hard enough to kill him. When he came to, he was on the ground, surrounded by his stepdad, Marsh's stepdad, Marsh's mom. Marsh's mom called him, quote, every unchristian kind of name she could think of and punctuated every one with a kick to my gut. Pee Wee and Marsh were dragged out into the barn, where Marsh was strung upside down, beaten with the pine slat until he was literally bloody. When it was Pee-wee's turn, Marcia's mom was outraged when she realized he was aroused by the pain. Dude was like another Albert Fish. Showbiz. Put your back into it, mama. Make my fat little bottom bleed. That's how they do it in Hollywood. I can't come if you can't hit me harder than that. He's no older than 13 years old, by the way, when this is going on. Marcia's mom proceeded to beat his genitals with a wooden slat until he was nearly unconscious. Pee-wee said he could not move when they let him down, and he remained on the barn floor all night long. Marcia's mom and stepdad then tried to go to Danny's house. Well, they did go to Danny's house, tried to dole out a similar punishment, but Danny's dad was waiting outside with a gun and threatened to kill their entire family if they touched Danny. Should have shot him and his son, Danny. They never talked about what happened after that. Marcia's mom did not want to report the rape to the police because she did not want to ruin her daughter's reputation. Ugh. Danny and his dad moved out of the area after that. They left for Texas. Marcia decided he needed to leave town too, and his mom was happy to be rid of him. She drove his degenerate ass to a bus station and disowned that son of a bitch. Pee-wee received a few postcards, one letter from his friends, never saw them again. And that was the end of the trouble trio. But the damage was done. Pee-wee was a bona fide psychopath with a taste for rape and violence now. If he didn't have it before in his mind. Now Pee-wee was alone and seeking an outlet for his violent urges. According to Pee-wee, the bothersome weight got heavier and harder. Pee-wee soon met a man at the gas station mechanic shop near him who was stationed at the naval base in North Charleston. He was driving his brand new Chevy when it blew a water hose 3 miles down the road. Pee-wee helped him out, enjoyed hearing his Navy stories. And the man asked Pee-wee if there was a way to make some money in the area without working too hard. Wink, wink. Pee-wee told him it would depend on what he was willing to do. The man said he had done time in juvie when he was a kid for breaking and entering. Now Pee-wee told him about stealing from some country houses, that little racket he had. So the man who eventually introduced himself as Walt said that he could handle the fencing and that he would pay Pee-wee for stealing certain items. And so it begins again for Pee-wee. Round 2. Walt picked him up every Saturday now for a few months, took him to a pre-selected house. This new criminal enterprise went smoothly for a while, but on the last Saturday of their 3rd month, Pee-wee wrote that, quote, everything turned to shit. Pee-wee selected a house near his family home because he knew the family. He traveled out of town for a funeral. When he realized the door was unlocked, he thought it was going to be an easy job, but then he went into the kitchen, found a girl standing inside holding a fucking hatchet. And Pee-wee knew this girl, right? It's a small area. She asked him what the hell he was doing in her house before she swung at him. She ended up chasing him outside. Pee-wee looked back to see if she was gaining on him. He stumbled on a tree root and fell to the ground. She caught up to him, swung at him again. Too bad she didn't hit him in the fucking face, but she missed. He grabbed her arm, wrenched the hatchet away from her, and now Pee-wee started swinging. He hit her twice on her arms, then he hit her on the head with the blunt side of the axe. She fell to the ground. He hits her a couple more times now in the back, I believe, with the sharp side of the axe. She stops moving, isn't making any noise, and he assumes she's dead. Pee-wee now runs to the edge of the woods, and he hears a shotgun blast. When he emerges from the other side of this little thicket of trees, he realizes Walt is already speeding down the road. His getaway driver has abandoned him, and the sheriff arrives 10 minutes later, finds him, and takes Pee-wee to jail. When the girl recovered, he had fractured her skull but not killed her and just otherwise wounded her. She was able to, positively identify Pee-wee. Pee-wee was charged with assault with a deadly weapon, like a plea deal, sentenced to the South Carolina Industrial School for Boys after taking that deal. The judge told Pee-wee he was lucky he was a juvenile, or he would have put him away for a long, long time. The judge then looked at the arrest report, asked Pee-wee why he had his mother's name and not his father's. Mama Yulia spoke up and said Pee-wee had her last name because she never married his father, but his legal name, Donald Henry Gaskins Jr., was written that way in the family Bible. And that is when he supposedly finally learned his own damn name. Pee-wee was committed to the industrial school June 18th, 1946. So he's 13 years old, just turned 13, 3 months prior. He's supposed to remain at the school until he turned 21 until he was granted an early discharge for good behavior. According to one report made during his time at the school, we are not it's not Pee-wee talking. This is a doctor. I need to do that voice. We are not attempting any diagnosis, but we are sure from our dealings with abnormal delinquents that this boy is antisocial, and there is something in his past development that is preying on his mind. We are requesting psychiatric treatment and proper placement in view of the fact that we are unable to adjust this boy to a group. 13 and already pretty fucked up. And unfortunately, he will not get the needed psychiatric treatment. In his autobiography, Final Truth, Pee-wee wrote that the school consisted of dormitories and school buildings with gardens and pastures, and that it, quote, looked more like a farm, college campus, than a prison. Guessing it was the nicest looking place he'd ever been to. There were no towers. There weren't many guards. Inmates were put in classes that taught them trade skills like carpentry, mechanics, metalworking. After classes, they'd work in the fields, and the boys could earn demerits if they broke the rules. When boys were locked in the dormitories at night, required to take showers, according to Pee-wee, that was when the older boys took their pick of the new boys. The biggest boy in Pee-wee's dorm, the alpha, was a kid who went by the name of Poss. P-O-S-S. So many unusual names in this story. We've met Pee-wee, Poss, Marsh, Hennett, Yulee, and Fanny so far. Poss allegedly approached Pee-wee this very night at the school, ordered him to come to his bed after lights out. In Pee-wee's words, he told me he was going to fuck me. Pee-wee said Poss was over 6 feet tall, over 200 pounds. Pee-wee was under 5 foot tall at this point, under 100 pounds. Not exactly a fair matchup. However, because the boys were told that they would be put in isolation and punished if they were caught doing unnatural sex acts, apparently that was a real problem with this place, and it seems to be. Pee-wee did not go to Poss's bed that night, and he will be punished severely for that. The next day, Poss does not pay much attention to him, not until lockdown. But after lockdown, 6 boys, including Poss, grabbed Pee-wee while he was showering and held him down and started raping him. And when word got out about what they were doing, some other kids came in and took their turn. And the more I learn about Pee-wee's childhood, the better and better I've been feeling about my own childhood. Holy shit. Pee-wee claimed he was raped by at least 20 boys in less than an hour's time that night. He said that afterwards his ass was tore up, literally so bad he couldn't move. Again, in Pee-wee's words, in the shower room, 6 boys grabbed me and spread-eagled me face down on the tile floor. One held each arm, one held each leg, and one sat in front of my face and slid forward until his hard-on rubbed against my nose. Then Poss lay down on my back and put a knife blade against my neck and said if I hollered, he'd cut my throat. He made me open my mouth for the sitting boy's hard-on, and I felt Poss's soapy dick ran my ass. Quick as he finished, another boy took his place. Then the hard-on come in my mouth, and as soon as I swallowed, another one took its place. Thinking back on it, I figured that in less than 1 hour, I was gang raped by at least 20 boys, and most of them took seconds in my mouth. I had never felt anything like that in my life. When they finally was through with me, I was so sore I couldn't move, and I heard Poss tell 2 boys to carry me to my bunk. That is some hell on earth shit. And then Poss, that's fucking outrageous. And then Poss told Pee-wee he had 2 choices going forward. He could be Poss's bitch, let Poss do whatever he wanted to him whenever he wanted to do it, or he could be gang raped on a regular basis by whoever wanted to stick their dick in his ass. Pee-wee said he could have gone to the supervisor's office and reported the boys, but then he would have been placed in protective isolation. And as much as he didn't want to keep getting fucked, he also didn't want to be all alone. So Pee-wee chose option A. He decided it would be easier to accept the way things were, and he agreed to allow Poss to do whatever he wanted to him whenever he wanted to do it. Dear God. And Pee-wee's graphic words again. Poss liked to suck, and he got so excited when I come in his mouth, he didn't last a full minute in my ass, which I could tolerate. This is just fucking normal life for him. But like the time he's writing this stuff, this is all just like, yeah, it's just, this is how life works. Still not 13 years old. Or he's just barely, he's still just 13 years old. Pee-wee said that after he fixed Poss's radio for him one night, though, he became his right-hand man, and they got friendlier. And sometimes now they would share new boys who came into the prison with Poss. Or, he would share. And by shared, I mean they would take turns raping these new guys. I can't think of any other serial killer who I've covered who had a rapier childhood than this guy. Despite their friendship, Poss still forced Pee-wee to have sex with him, and even would sexually trade him out with other boss boys in the other dorms. Let's hear Pee-wee talk about that, because as fucked up as how I can relay things sometimes. I'm still not quite as raw and uncensored as old Pee-wee was. I was Poss's right hand in our dorm, and when new boys come in, he sometimes shared them with me. Poss said he was partial to me because I was so little my dick looked big compared to the rest of me. Of course, he was called Boss Poss Hoss because his cock was so damn big. The only real bad problem that developed between me and Poss was that him being boss boy in our dorm, he made deals with the boss boys at other dorms, trading favors for cigarettes or whatever. And one of the things boss boys traded to each other was the littler boys like me. I never knew when I was going to be told to go somewhere and strip or blow or ream or get rammed or whatever by whoever Pops had made another deal with. How is this his fucking real life? This is his childhood. After about a year of living in this waking nightmare, Pee-wee and 4 other boys escaped. But they were caught 2 days later. Pee-wee had jumped off the truck, ran to his old hideout in the woods, took him 2 days to get there. Once he made it, he just passed out from exhaustion. And then when he woke up, there was the Florence County Deputy Sheriff standing above him. He was sentenced to 3 months of hard labor, isolation for his escape, and he would receive 30 lashes. Pee-wee then made a second, then a third escape attempt. Several months later, one with another boy he could trust. The third time, they were on the run for 6 days before he got caught. Put back into isolation for 4 months and given 50 lashes. When Pee-wee was out that time, his old buddy Poss was released, and he was now controlled by a new boss boy. And Pee-wee said his new boss boy made old Poss boss boy look like a peach. He said this dude, who he never names, was, quote, real fond of watching gang rapes with me on the bottom. Pee-wee escaped again that summer, making it all the way to Williamsburg County because a cousin from there said that Pee-wee's aunt there would let him stay with her if he did chores. And so Pee-wee did stay there for several months. But then one day his aunt went to town to go shopping, returned with a relative of theirs who was a police officer. This relative asked Pee-wee about life at the reformatory and said he wasn't going to arrest him, but he did think Pee-wee should go back and turn himself in. The superintendent of the reformatory offered Pee-wee a deal, no lashes, just 30 days of hard labor and isolation if he turned himself in. Pee-wee took that deal, but then he said he was tricked. He said that once he got back, he was subjected to 20 lashes every night. After a week, he'd had enough. He snapped, attacked a guard, then he was sent to the state psychiatric hospital for 5 weeks isolation. It was there that he would speak to a psychiatrist who asked him, amongst other questions, if he believed in God. Pee-wee told him he hadn't given it much thought, but he figured if so many other people went to church and donated money, there must be a God. Psychiatrist asked him if any voices had told him to attack that girl with a hatchet. Pee-wee said no, arguing it was self-defense. Psychiatrist asked him about his childhood, why he kept escaping from school. The psychiatrist also implied he would see Pee-wee again, but then Pee-wee developed appendicitis, had to go to the hospital. And after that, Pee-wee never saw this psychiatrist again. He was sent back to the reformatory, put in isolation, and threatened with more lashing. So he decided to escape again towards the end of 1950. He's now 17 years old. And this time he'll make it all the way to Sumter, South Carolina, about 50 miles from Florence, where he reconnected with his old rapist buddy, Poss. The fucking band's back together. Why would you seek this guy out? Poss told Pee-wee that he often stayed there with his uncle, who put together crews to work for traveling carnivals. So now we got a carnival in this story. This keeps getting more ridiculous. Pee-wee found Poss, got a job helping set up and take down carnivals equipment. But then he developed a hernia from all the heavy lifting. So then he was made a night guard at the carnival. And this carnival traveled to Georgia, Florida, and North Carolina, and of course all over South Carolina. I wish I knew the name of that carnival. This also confirms the worst assumptions I had about carnivals as a kid, that their carnies were people exactly like Wee Gaskins and Poss. Just fucking rapey backwoods gremlins. During his travels to the South, Pee-wee met a girl named Mary who was 13 and a half. He thought she was the most beautiful girl he'd ever seen. He begged her to marry him. But she said she didn't want to be married to a boy who was on the run from the law. She's 13 years old. Why is she talking about getting married? Fucking kid's growing up way too fast in this suck. She told him to go back and finish his sentence so he could be free to live a normal life. And Pee-wee and Mary, they'll get married. January 22nd, 1951. They spent one night together before Pee-wee surrendered to police and returned to reform school. Pee-wee would now be held in isolation for the remaining 3 months of his sentence. Mary would stay with his mom and stepdad and prospect and visit him for an hour every Sunday. I can't believe after all that, they just let him out early. I guess they were just tired of having to deal with him, just constantly escaping. After getting out at the age of 17, he could have been held until 21, just a few months away from turning 18. The happy couple now moves in together. Pee-wee gets a job doing part-time construction work, which he hates. Doesn't pay much. Mary then soon becomes pregnant, and their daughter Shirley is born April 17th, 1952, when Mary is 14. Pee-wee would have 2 children altogether, his daughter Shirley, and then later a son named Donald Jr. I guess it'd be Donald III, who he had with his second wife, Jerry Dolores, who he will marry a decade later in 1962. And Jerry will occasionally travel with Pee-wee. Other times he'll live with their parents. Shocking that his marriage to Mary won't work out, right? I'm getting ahead of myself. Back to 1951. Pee-wee encountered a man in the Florence area he knew from reform school. He was called the Slick Duck because of his hairstyle. Sounds like a greaser, real cool cat, daddy-o. Yeah, why not add a Slick Duck to this story? We got Pee-wee, Poss, Parsh, Hinnant, Yulie, Fanny, and Slick Duck. Slick offered Pee-wee a job on a tobacco farm. Pee-wee told him he hated farm work. But Slick told him he should take the job, literally giving him a wink, implying that there was more to it than just, traditional labor. Slick also helped Pee-wee and Mary land a house rent-free on a farm a few miles outside of Johnsonville, South Carolina. There, Mary learned tobacco grading when Slick realized Pee-wee was good with motors. He has him start working on farm trucks. After a few months of working on the farm, Slick picks Pee-wee up, drives him to a tobacco barn in the middle of nowhere. They steal the best tobacco from that barn, load it onto a waiting truck for transport, which departed the area soon afterwards. Pee-wee and Slick hang around until after midnight, and then they set that barn on fire. Pee-wee and Slick. What a barn-burning duo. Mr. Duck drove Pee-wee home, paid him $300. Pee-wee didn't ask questions, thanked him for the gig. Now he had to convince his wife, Mary, that the money wasn't stolen and that he just got a huge bonus for hard work. Well, it turned out that barn burning was not a one-off. Pee-wee and Slick were now in the arson business together. Before Christmas 1951, he and Slick had burned 2 more barns in South Carolina and 3 barns in North Carolina. In total, Pee-wee earned almost $2,000 for that, equivalent to about $25,000 today. Pee-wee signed on for another year at the farm, and they continued committing arson after arson on the side. He soon earned himself almost $1,000 for burning down a warehouse in the Charlotte area, which was a riskier job. Slick eventually told Pee-wee that he was working with farmers to commit insurance fraud, and that the government would pay on the crop loss, and that the farmers were not aware that Slick was hauling off the good tobacco for resale before he burned the barns. So Mr. Duck running quite the little racket here. But like nearly all good scams, this one eventually will come to an end. The police will come knocking on Pee-wee's door, asking about old Slick. Pee-wee was terrified that Slick was going to be arrested, then rat him out and reveal everything they were doing, but that was not the case. The officers explained that Slick's ex-wife and her new husband, wouldn't you know it, had both been murdered. And Slick was seen going into their house right before gunshots were heard. And his 2 kids said they literally saw their dad fucking kill their mom and stepdad. Fucking Slick! That's some real slick shit to be doing. Not surprised that Mr. Duck was a murderer. Slick was now lost in the wind, and he would never return to the area. A new man named Sticky Goat took over the farm, offered Pee-wee a regular job now, but he was unhappy with work, and was particularly aggravated by 2 teen girls who lived on that farm. His name was not Sticky Goat. It was Arthur Lewis. I just thought Sticky Goat would be a proper counterpart to Slick Duck. According to Pee-wee, those 2 teen girls on this farm that he thought were harassing him, was always ragging me about something, call me names and whatnot, like they was better than me and Mary. Pee-wee said he told the girls to leave him alone. And then one of them said she heard her father and some others saying Pee-wee had something to do with burning tobacco barns, and they were waiting to have him arrested so they wouldn't have to pay him. He said she called him scum, told him he belonged in a prison. Pee-wee was pissed, told her to shut up, get the hell away from him. Then she came closer, said she was going to tell her dad that Pee-wee tried to rape her, so he'd be put away in prison for a long time. And then she spit at him. And then she said, but you ain't worth the trouble, Pee-wee. You ain't even good enough to kiss my ass. And this is Pee-wee's version of events, of course. I doubt this went down that way. Yeah, I bet he was trying to hit on her, probably trying to rape her. Pee-wee said he snapped, swung a hammer he was already holding, and hit the girl right behind her right ear. Then he hit her again on the top of her head. She fell to the floor completely still. Then he kicked her in the face, quote, for good measure. The other girl screamed and ran. Pee-wee started to chase after her, but then thought it'd be smarter just to run off instead. Pee-wee said he didn't have time to tell Mary what had happened before he fled. He hid out in an American Legion building on the other side of Johnsonville, but became stir-crazy after a few days. So, Pee-wee being Pee-wee, he set that building on fire, fled to a deserted shack where law enforcement found him 2 days later. A September 28, 1952 article from the Florence Morning News provides some information on the incident outside of Pee-wee's own perspective. Johnsonville, September 27th. A heavily armed posse combed the woods and swampland surrounding this small community in the southeastern corner of Florence County today in a fruitless search for a 21-year-old white man wanted for an alleged attempted rape of a 13-year-old white girl just outside Johnsonville last Sunday afternoon. Chief of Police Ed Lurie identified the wanted man as Junior Gaskins, alias Junior Parrot, but really Pee-wee, who, he said, is an ex-convict. Searchers called off their hunt late tonight when dogs tracked Gaskins to a point of Lake City Highway just outside of Johnsonville. No trace of Gaskins has been found since the alleged act last Sunday. Then yesterday, J.C. Powell, a farmer in the Piston section, reported the theft of a shotgun from his home. Officers decided the gun was stolen by Gaskins, and a search showed a place in the nearby woods where it is believed Gaskins slept last night. Sheriff John Hanna arrived on the scene early today and sent the request to Columbia for the dogs. Lurie said today that Gaskins had been employed by a Florence contractor and was at the home of an uncle, Weldon Parrott, last Sunday. Lurie said that Gaskins borrowed Parrott's truck to go to his home in the position section to get his lunch pail. Gaskins, Lurie said, invited several children, including the girl said to have been the victim of the attack, to join him. When they arrived at Gaskins' home, the chief said Gaskins called the girl into the house and then attempted to attack her. That sounds about right. He was surprised by his wife, according to Lurie, and fled with the truck. The truck was later found abandoned at Potato Bed Ferry in Marion County. Yeah, that attack sounds much more truthful. This was all about Pee-wee trying to rape this poor girl. Pee-wee's now charged with attempted murder and assault with a deadly weapon with intent to inflict grave bodily harm and arson. In October of 1952, Pee-wee is acquitted on the arson charge due to a lack of evidence. A few days later, the solicitor, South Carolina equivalent to a district attorney, offered him a plea deal for a lesser charge of assault and battery with an 18-month sentence. Pee-wee agreed to the deal, but didn't get it in writing. He pled guilty, was then sentenced to 5 years in prison. Pee-wee not thrilled about that sentence. He shouted at the judge, "Well, fuck you, you old son of a bitch!" And that got him an extra year for contempt. Pee-wee joined the population of the South Carolina State Penitentiary in the fall of 1952. He's 19 years old. After all that we've gone over, he is still a teenager. After several weeks in the prison, Pee-wee said a large man came up to him in the yard and told him that from then on, he belonged to an inmate named Arthur, one of the older power men. Right, there was the boss boys, now there's the power men, and these power men got first choice of new meat. So here we go again. Is this really what prison life was back in the 1950s? Or were South Carolina prisons just like especially rapey? Pee-wee said he was transferred to Arthur's cell that evening. Arthur ordered him to strip naked and apparently beat the shit out of him and then raped him. For the next 6 months, Pee-wee said he was under Arthur's total control. He claimed he was also raped by multiple other violent men. For fuck's sake. This dude's youth revolved mostly around rape, from either being raped or trying to rape others. How good are you feeling about your own life right now in comparison? If his childhood was somehow better than yours, oh my God, I'm sorry that you went through hell. Pee-wee knew planning an escape would take a long time, and he felt like he could not wait for that. He couldn't handle all the sexual assaults any longer. He felt like he had to do something to protect himself. As he wrote in Final Truth, "I gave it lots of thought, and I reckon I needed to come up with an act so goddamn violent that every man in the pen will be scared shitless of me. What I might do next. And the onlyest way to do that was to make my bones. I had to kill somebody, and not just anybody. I had to kill somebody powerful and special." He said he heard that the meanest inmate in the prison was a man named Hazel Brazzle. Fucking Hazel. That's the meanest dude's name. Not Gertrude, not Kimberly. We got Pee-wee, Poss, Marsh, Hinnant, Yulee, Fanny, Slick Duck, and the baddest man in South Carolina, Hazel. Hazel fucking Brazzle. He said Brazzle kept mostly to himself, sticking with his small crew of boys. Pee-wee told Arthur that he'd heard lots of talk about Brazzle not trading with the other power men and having his boys steal for him. He questioned why no one had done anything about that yet. He said Arthur laughed, said no one could get to Brazzle. And Pee-wee responded, "I figure anybody can be got to. I know I could kill him." Arthur didn't believe him. Now Pee-wee got to plotting. He figured out what Brazzle liked to eat and drink, what his daily routine was. He went to the kitchen to make a sandwich one day, stole a paring knife while he was there, purchased an orange soda from the canteen, and then he walked right on into Brazzle's cell. Brazzle was lying on his cot with his boys keeping guard. Since Pee-wee was offering him a sandwich and drink, he was let in. He said it was from Arthur. Pee-wee did this 3 more times over the next 2 weeks, slowly gaining Brazzle's trust. And then during his 5th visit, he said, only one of Brazzle's boys was now standing outside his cell, and Brazzle was sitting on the toilet. Pee-wee said he entered the cell, set the food down, approached old Hazel, palm with a knife in his pocket, and Hazel allegedly said, "The fuck you staring at?" You know what? That sounds like something Hazel would say. According to Pee-wee, quote, "I didn't hesitate a lick. I jabbed a knife into his left jugular vein and sliced toward his Adam's apple and twisted it deep in his pulse artery. Brazzle's throat was cut open before he could raise his arms to protect himself. He tried to yell but just gurgled. The prison guards would, of course, question Pee-wee, but all he would say was that he got into an argument with Hazel. Hazel became violent, and then he had to kill him in self-defense. Pee-wee was placed in solitary. While he was there, word spread about the murder. To his surprise, Arthur congratulated him upon his release from solitary for having the balls to kill Hazel. Hazel's death had apparently made Arthur the number one power man in the prison because people thought it was Arthur's call, and Pee-wee was now the second. Pee-wee and Arthur both take a plea deal for manslaughter now. Pee-wee receives a 9-year sentence to run concurrent with his 6-year sentence, meaning he only gets an extra 3 years for this. And that was worth it for him, because Pee-wee said he was never fucked again for the rest of his sentence. Not against his will. He was a power man himself now. Had his own boy. And he said he treated his boy well. He was never violent with him. I mean, he for sure fucking raped him. But it was like gentle, considerate rapes, I guess. Pee-wee's very young wife, Mary, made the smart choice to divorce his fucking crazy ass in mid-1953. Pee-wee was devastated, decided he had to escape prison, but not to harm Mary, he said. But because the divorce hurt so bad, he felt the urge to get back out on the streets and hurt some other people. So he's very well adjusted, psychologically. Pee-wee said he escaped prison next in 1955 on the back of a garbage truck. This dude was crafty. He used his small size to his advantage by shoving himself inside one of the garbage cans. Said the driver and his assistant both helped Pee-wee because they were afraid of him. Once they were clear, Pee-wee popped himself out of the drum, jumped out onto the highway leading to Florence. He then walked through the woods back to Lake City, stole a car from his cousin, David Gaskins. Can you imagine having this dude in your family if he was your cousin? What a fucking curse. A week later, he would drive all the way to Lake Wales, Florida, in hopes of finding that traveling carnival again. He found his old acquaintance, Poss, who was now married with 3 kids in Orlando. How does that psycho have 3 kids and a wife? That poor woman. Pee-wee and old boss boy Poss now returned to work in the carnival. But Pee-wee wasn't happy with carnival work no more. Poss wasn't either. He wanted to get back to his wife and kids. And again, why are these fucking guys friends? The day after they met, Poss organized a gang rape of Pee-wee. Now it's like Poss is his best bud in the whole world. This dude was so damaged. Anyway, during one of their visits with Poss's wife, Pee-wee meets a girl named Junie Alice Holden, 19. Pee-wee at this point is 22. And Pee-wee decided he wants to marry her. But then after 2 weeks of courting, he's out of money and no longer interested. She probably wasn't into cornholing as much as he was. So he goes back to carny life. And now Pee-wee meets one of the, quote, girly show dancers, to use his words. A woman who said her name was Helen McCoy. Initially, Pee-wee fell in love with her and followed her to Tennessee, where she said she had a family emergency to deal with. On the road there, she told him that her real name was actually Betty Jean Gates. And Pee-wee was a big fan of Betty, at least initially. In his interesting words, she was what they call contortionist, which meant she could wrap her ankles around her neck and walk on her hands. She did that for me buck naked, and she fucked me that way, which was surely the most exciting way I'd done it in a while, if ever. And she loved to fuck, while she was twisted up into all kind of other pretzel shapes, too. I never met a woman who liked sex, any kind of sex, as much as she did. I was so hot for her that I was ready to follow her anywhere. And, hail Lucifina. I mean, he doesn't deserve her, but hail Lucifina. Betty Jean soon revealed that, like Pee-wee, she was a fugitive. She was wanted in 5 states: Tennessee, West Virginia, Kentucky, Ohio, and Virginia. Her charges included forgery, larceny, accessory to armed robbery, grand theft auto, armed assault, burglary, and escape. What a pair. When these two arrived in Cookeville, Tennessee, she gave Pee-wee a carton of cigarettes and some money, asked him to take them up the street to her brother, who was in the Putnam County Jail, and needed money for bail. She said she couldn't do it herself because of the warrants out against her. After she bribed Pee-wee with more freaky sex, he went to the jail to see Betty's brother, and then when he got back to the motel, Pee-wee discovered that his car was gone, and so were all of Betty's belongings. Ha-ha! Psycho met his match. Pee-wee decided to wait it out, see if she'd return, and she did not. But she did manage to get him in more trouble. Come morning, the police busted down his motel room door because the carton of cigarettes he'd brought into the prison had a razor blade snuck inside it. And now he learns that Betty Jean's brother was actually her husband, and that he had, used that razor blade on a guard to escape. Pee-wee lied to the police, said his name was David Gaskins, name of the cousin he stole the car from, and that he didn't have shit to do with the escape. The stolen car was found in the parking lot of the bus depot in a town 35 miles away now. Authorities searched the glove department, found the registration for David Gaskins with a South Carolina address, not a Florida one like Pee-wee said. And then South Carolina authorities will confirm the car had been stolen. And then the police learned that Pee Wee was on the run from prison where he'd been serving time for assault and murder. And so now he goes back to prison yet again. He's charged with aiding escape and sentenced to 6 months in Tennessee plus 3 more months for assault on another prisoner after he'd been arrested. Then after that, he's extradited back to South Carolina. He doesn't have much to say about his time in the Tennessee jail. Must not have been too rapey. And then the FBI, they investigated the car theft. They now charge Pee Wee with interstate auto theft, and he's sentenced to 3 years in the Atlanta federal prison, concurrent with his time in South Carolina. And Pee Wee's actually thrilled. He much preferred the cleaner, more modern federal facility to the South Carolina State Prison. He would later say it was the strictest prison he was ever in, but that his time there was the easiest. He didn't act up, didn't get made anyone's bitch, never tried to escape. He made friends with some mafia guys from New York who he seemed to really admire. Said one of the main regrets of his life later was to not go and try and work for the Genovese crime family, or Genovese, in New York City when he got out. Gaskins completed his sentence, was released August 6, 1961, and he returned to Florence County, South Carolina. Moved back in with his mom and stepdad. He's 28 years old, frustrated that he's making next to nothing harvesting tobacco back in Prospect. After a few months, he gets into a little altercation with his stepdad and moves out. And Pee Wee's always colorful words. Because I didn't want to upset my mama. I tried not to let it bother me. My stepdaddy always acted like a dingleberry asshole. I was still littler than him, so he bossed me around. He talked real nasty to me like he'd always done. But then one day when he was working in the barn, he made a real big mistake. He got mad about the way I was doing something or not doing something. I can't remember which. And he backhanded me hard enough to knock me sprawling. I bounced up mad as hell. I grabbed the pitchfork, backed him up against the stall. I was truly a cunt hair away from killing that son of a bitch, but then I stopped. I couldn't kill him because for some God knows what reason, my mama loved that old sack of horse shit, and I couldn't never do nothing to hurt my mama. So I just pushed the prongs tied up against his gut roll and told him how I made my bones in prison, and that if he ever hit me again, I would run him through in spite of my love for mama. Next day, I decided it was best I move out. Never a dull moment around Pee Wee. His life was a lot of things, but never boring. He thought about hooking back up with his old buddy Poss now. His old boss Poss, the old rascal. He used to ass rape him, but would also often be kind enough to suck his dick. But Pee Wee was still sore about being scammed by that contortionist, and the carnival pay wasn't great. He ended up going to stay with his cousin Marvin for a while instead, and then he lived with his Uncle Dewey. Of course this son of a bitch has an Uncle Dewey. What the fuck? Pee Wee, Poss, Marsh, Hinnant, Yulee, Fanny, Slick Duck, Hazel, the baddest man in South Carolina, and Uncle Dewey. Okay. While Pee Wee bounces around, he does some work fixing whatever people need fixing for cash. Seems like he was, always doing that on the side. Then he ran across a pastor named George E. Todd, who lived right in Prospect. Pastor Todd. Fucking, why not? Another great name for this story. Pastor Todd would travel up and down the coastline of South Carolina and Georgia, preaching and selling things that parishioners had donated to him to make money for his pastoring. Pastor Todd took a liking to Pee Wee, and Pee Wee started traveling with him as a barely paid assistant of sorts. And Pastor Todd apparently had no idea that Pee Wee only agreed to help him because he wanted to break into places outside of Florence County and burglarize them. And that was exactly what he would do. Classic Pee Wee. In his poetic words. Because Reverend Todd was so respected, no one suspicioned that when he was in town preaching, I was picking out good places to break into later. Didn't take me long to figure out that houses in beach towns are even easier pickings than ones out in the country. Folks near the beach and ocean tend to relax to the point of pure carelessness. I kept my eyes open for places that looked uppity rich and easy to get in. And a few weeks later, when he was preaching miles away, I slipped back and broke into him. I was real careful to check before I went in, make sure no one was there. As we traveled around, sometimes I spotted and broke into country stores where I seen racks of guns and displays of watches and such. Usually I could haul away $1,000 worth in 10 minutes. But I never sold out of the back of Preacher's van any of the things I stole. I always fenced them things through 2 men in Sumter, who I'd knowed for a long time. They paid me real fair, about 20 cents on the dollar, so I had no complaints. Okay, so he's got his new business. And then in 1962, Pee Wee gets married again. Allow me to let him share the good news with you after reminding you that he is now 29 years old. Then in 1962, I got married again. Her name was Jerry Dolores, and she was fine even though she's almost 18, which was old by my standards. She was pretty and nice and sweet, and I treated her good, like I done all the women I married. She traveled with me some of the time and stayed with her folks other times. When we was apart, I telephoned to her when I could and sent her little presents and money. From then on, whenever I was in a honky-tonk where I didn't know anybody and a woman asked me to pay money for her ass, I said, to hell with you. I got me a fine teenage wife waiting to fuck me when I get home. What a romantic. Even though she was almost 18, which was old by my standards. He really wasn't holding anything back in this autobiography, did he? According to some sources, this pair had a son named Donald. Pee-wee references his son in his book, but never names him, never talks about his birth, never shares any real details at all. Same for his daughter, Shirley. Just a few years after getting married, becoming a dad again in 1964, Pee-wee's heading back to prison. Oh, yeah. This time for raping a 12-year-old girl. Someone not too old by his standards, I guess. Pee-wee said in his autobiography that he had known this girl, Patsy, all her life. One Saturday, his wife took the car to town to go shopping. He knew that Patsy's parents were most likely gone, so he went to her house and found her there. She let him in when he said he was just there for a visit, and then this fucking animal told her, this 12-year-old girl, how many women he had been with, about how he had attacked one woman with a hatchet, another with a hammer, and how he had killed a man in prison. Patsy was understandably terrified, and she starts crying. Pee-wee now tells her to take off all her clothes, to lie down, and he won't hurt her, but he will hurt her. He will rape her. And while he was trying to clean up afterwards, he heard two of Patsy's aunts approach the house. He makes Patsy get dressed quick. The two of them flee to Pee-wee's family home, but they had left bloody sheets behind. God, this fucking poor girl. Officers soon show up at Pee-wee's home, tell his stepdad, who had showed up to Pee-wee's home, that they believed that Patsy had been raped and kidnapped. Pee-wee had told Patsy to hide. He had pretended to be sleeping in the same room as her, but then his stepdad came in, sees Patsy's skirt sticking out from behind the wardrobe, and then he does the right thing. He tells the police that they're there. And Pee-wee's arrested and charged with statutory rape. His arraignment is scheduled for the very next week. But he doesn't want to be sent back to that South Carolina penitentiary where he had been raped, so the rapist makes yet another escape plan. Pee-wee's arraignment took place June 8, 1964. Once he's inside the courthouse, his cuffs are removed. He's locked inside a room to await arraignment, a room on the second floor of the building. And Pee-wee jumped out the window. Quote, quick as a flea. No, that's not quite accurate. Quick as a flea fuck. I really hate this dude, but I gotta say, I do like the way he describes things sometimes. The window wasn't even locked because, according to Pee-wee, the law was damn sure nobody would be crazy enough to jump out a window 30 feet above the ground. But I was little Wee Gaskins. I didn't weigh 120 pounds, shoes and all. So I just aimed my ass and back for the boxwood hedges that lined the sidewalk. All I got was some scratches and bruises, but I paid them never no mind. Okay. Little cockroach then finds a county car with the key in the ignition, drives the fuck on out of Florence County. He went to his mom's house, fetched his wallet before he took off again. He left the county car in a drainage ditch, headed down back roads towards Dillon, South Carolina on foot. That night, steals another car, drives all the way to North Carolina looking for that old traveling Carnival he'd worked at, but their schedule had changed. Then Pee-wee recalled his old rape buddy, Poss, told him about Robinson County, North Carolina, where a man could find a nice place to hide in the woods. Pee-wee makes it there, rents a boarding house from a woman who didn't ask too many questions. He then abandoned his new stolen car in a Charlotte garage, takes a bus to Raleigh, where he pays cash for an older vehicle. At the end of his second month as a free man on the run in Robinson County, he marries a 17-year-old girl named Lenny, who he met at a hardware store. Well, he kind of marries her. They got married at her house. Never went to a courthouse or anything because he's on the run from the law and because he's still married. Do you want him to hear? Do you want to hear him share the good news? Of course you do. Here's what this wonderful wordsmith said about all this. At the end of my second month, I met a 17-year-old lumpy girl named Lenny. We met at the hardware store where she worked, and I was mad hard for her first second I seen her. We went out to dinner and to the roadhouses and talked and laughed, but that's all she'd let me do until I told her I loved her and wanted to marry her. Never stops amazing me what a woman will do in exchange for them words. Not that I didn't mean it when I said I loved her, my other wives too. I truly loved them all. Anyhow, we got married at her family's house, lived together for 3 months before I got so restless I couldn't tolerate it no more. And one afternoon I told her I had to go buy some parts at the junkyard, and I left the place where we lived, left Robertson County, and never had no intention of ever seeing her again. Again, such a romantic, right? A romantic 31-year-old dude lying to a 17-year-old girl so he can sleep with her because he's mad hard for her. After abandoning his teen bride, Pee-wee goes back to Charlotte, calls one of his fences to ask about his other wife. Fucking Jesus Christ. Jerry, who's staying with relatives in his absence. He then called Jerry at work, told her to take a bus to Savannah so he could see her. You could tell she was angry. Of course she was. But Pee-wee said he was sorry, wanted to make things up. And Jerry agrees to meet him. She shows up in Savannah, and the couple now flee to Florida. There, Pee-wee finds the old Carnival office trailer and learns his friend Poss had died of suicide after his wife and kids had all died in a house fire. Jesus Christ. Do you think that maybe Poss set that fire? I do. Maybe his wife found out that he'd raped some kids or something. Pee-wee and Jerry left Florida the next day. Jerry now wanted to go home, so Pee-wee then agreed to take her to Savannah so she could get on a bus back to South Carolina. He planned on returning to North Carolina. On the way to the bus station, he's pulled over for speeding. Well, he was supposed to have pulled over anyway. Pee-wee Florida tried to outrun the cops, but then he blew a tire and crashed into a swamp. Now Pee-wee took off on foot. He fled deep into the swamp, knowing the police wouldn't want to pursue him in the dangerous creature-infested waters where he was the most dangerous creature of all. He walked until he came upon a train yard, crawled into an empty freight car, and rode that freight car back to North Carolina. What about his wife, Jerry? Well, he just left her in the car. He assumed she'd figure out how to make it back home, I guess. Once back in North Carolina, he visits his other wife, teenage Lenny, and takes her out for a night in the town. Now, wouldn't you think she was still pretty pissed at him for leaving her with no warning whatsoever, though? Well, she was. The next morning, he was woken up by 5 police officers who had been summoned by Lenny. I love it. Hail Nimrod, Lenny. Pee-wee was now extradited back to South Carolina, where he was tried and sentenced to 8 years for rape, escape, unlawful flight to avoid prosecution, interstate transportation of a stolen vehicle, and auto theft. With his criminal record, why not just put him away for life already? He raped a fucking 12-year-old. Pee-wee served his time quietly and was paroled in November of 1968 after serving just 4 years, and he didn't even get raped one time during this stretch. He said that when he showed back up to his prison, his reputation preceded him. People remembered that he had killed a man inside before, and that he had escaped prison numerous times, and he had spent time in Atlanta, they'd heard, with mob men. So no one fucked with Pee-wee this go-around. And according to him, in order to get out quicker, he didn't fuck with anybody else either. He said it was different now as well in the prison. The prison had been reformed. It wasn't the old butthole free-for-all fiesta it used to be. I feel like I said friesta. Butthole free-for-all fiesta. Yeah, it's a free party. It's a friesta. He later wrote about getting out. I was 35 years old. Oh, I should do it in his voice. I was 35 years old when I got out of CCI in 68, and I was damn determined I was never going back to prison, which didn't mean I wasn't ever going to do anything illegal again. Just wasn't ever planning on getting caught. He was able to get a job at Fort Roofing and Sheet Metal in Sumter, South Carolina, only about an hour's drive from Prospect. How fun for the poor girl he raped, who's 16 now. According to Pee-wee, I did my real work and made my real money in the evenings on the weekends, stripping, reworking, repainting stolen cars brought in from out of state. Pee-wee also purchased a hearse around this time, started driving around with a plastic skeleton inside, bumper sticker that read, "We haul anything, living or dead." Again, he was never boring. Now, he would literally tell people, for years he did this apparently, whenever they asked why he drove a hearse, he'd say, "Because I killed so many people, I need a hearse to haul them to my own private cemetery." People thought he was joking. Years later, they will learn he was dead serious. Part of his strategy to never go back to prison was to kill anyone he thought could incriminate him. Pee-wee rented a rundown home out in the country for $25 a month now. Lived half a mile from the elderly couple who owned the property, and he used a little tenant house he lived in to store his stolen parts. Also worked on stolen cars in a barn near the tenant house. All of Pee-wee's family still lived in Florence County, including his first wife and daughter, Shirley, who was now about 17 and married with her own children. Yes, children, plural, at 17. Pee-wee's grandpa now. Oh, Papa Pee-wee. Also, again, holy shit, we're kids growing up fast in the backwoods area of South Carolina, our story's set in today. Pee-wee and his daughter got together often, even though as part of his condition, the conditions of his release, he was not supposed to set foot in Florence County. But Pee-wee's going to be Pee-wee. He going to live a life that Papa Pee-wee wants. Pee-wee started dating several different lucky women he met at bars and clubs in the area. Oh, life was great. But in Pee-wee's own consistently fucked up words, it didn't make no difference how agreeable and enjoyable things was. Every once in a while, my insides started getting them aggravated and bothersome feelings again. The same as I had got regular from time to time as long as I could remember. First, that special heaviness commenced to roll around my gut and up my spine and into my head and down again. I hurt from my balls to behind my eyes. I was truly in a terrible kind of pain. It felt like it wanted to tear me open so we could get out. It didn't seem to be brought on by anything or anybody in particular, but when it come, I sure knew it was there. I got edgy, upset, mean as a cottonmouth moskin in a gallon-sized mason jar. When I was like that, I knew the best thing for me to do was get far away from any folks that mattered to me. I sure don't never want to hurt a wife or kid when I exploded. But he would hurt kids. Holy fuck, would he ever. Many years later, Pee Wee would tell his daughter Shirley that every so often he got the urge to see blood. Called himself a vampire. Said he felt anxious, shaky, and it wouldn't go away till he killed somebody. Count Pee Wee started spending a fair amount of time driving up and down the Carolina coast around this time. He claimed that whenever he saw a girl hitchhiking, he'd stop and offer her a ride. If she got in, they'd get to talking, and eventually he'd ask if she had a place to stay. If she didn't, he would offer to get a motel room for the both of them for the night, like a gentleman. If the girl said no, he would offer her money in exchange for sex, like a gentleman. If she said no again, or got upset or offended, he would stop the car and tell her to get the fuck out, like a gentleman. He said he wanted to hurt him, but he didn't want any of the girls reporting him to the police. Eventually, Papa Pee Wee, Sir Gaskins, the Count, got frustrated by this routine. Found that it didn't excite him to pay for sex when he could sleep with women he picked up at bars for free. But then he realized that the girls who lingered in his fantasies and thoughts the most were the ones who said no to him, the ones who denied this evil incarnate walking Napoleon complex, the ones who had the nerve to get out of his car instead of fucking him sideways, the ones who in his deranged mind thought they was too good for him, which they were. They definitely all were. But those were the girls he really wanted now, and not just for sex. He said that this is when he really started to regularly fantasize about committing very violent acts against these women. But realistically, at the time, he knew he probably couldn't get away with doing that. So he didn't pursue this fantasy yet. Usually, Pee Wee said when these dark fantasies took hold of him, they'd fade within about 24 hours. But then they always came back a few weeks later. One Sunday morning in late September of 1969, Pee Wee said he felt those bothersome urges again. He left Sumter, headed for Myrtle Beach, about 100 miles away. It was after Labor Day, so there weren't many girls out hitchhiking that day. If they were out, they weren't alone. But then in the mid-afternoon, Pee Wee said he saw a pretty blonde girl alone on the road. He stopped, let her into his car. She said she was heading to Charleston that night and Jacksonville the next day. She was meeting friends, and they were all going to work on a yacht in Miami. The girl started telling him about her history of working on yachts, sailing around Florida and the Caribbean, and Pee Wee made his move. He interrupted her, told her that he hadn't been planning on driving past Georgetown, but he would be happy to take her all the way to Charleston if they could have a nice dinner, a nice restaurant together, and then get a motel room for the night where, he could aggressively cornhole her like a gentleman. Like the boys in prison, used to do to him. He said all that stuff except for the cornholing part, probably. The girl responded with a nervous laugh and politely declined. Pee Wee said that was fine, but now she'd have to get to Charleston on her own because he didn't do anything without getting something in return. The girl quickly agreed, yeah, that's fair, and asked to be let out of the car. He now drove a couple more miles until he found a dirt shoulder where he could pull over, and then according to his later recollection and final truth, when I stopped, I turned sideways on a seat and stared at her, and that was the moment when my miracle come shining down. And the answer was simple. What I had to do was kill her. If she was dead, she could never tell the law nobody nothing. So once I made up my mind and decided she's going to die anyhow, I could do anything I wanted with her. Anything. That's a fucking terrifying mental place. When the girl reached for her duffel bag, Pee Wee said he punched her in the side of the head, hit her twice more. She fell to the floorboard. He then used her belt to tie her hands behind her back, then looped his own belt around her neck. And then he started driving again down a dead-end dirt logging road. Along the way, the girl started to regain consciousness. He said he could tell she was trying to figure out her next move. So Pee Wee stopped driving, pulled her out of the car by her belt, one around her neck, reached back into his car, took out a small knife, putting the tip of the blade up against her nostril, and wanted her to be quiet. Then he forced her to remove her clothing before he violently sexually assaulted her. And it was exceptionally violent. This is so brutal. I'm just gonna share a summary instead of his account, because it was like it made me nauseous. He said he pulled on one of her nipples very hard and stretched it out and then sliced it off with his knife. then forced her through tears to eat it. Her tears, of course. When she vomited it back up, he then stood up, stomped on her pubic bone hard enough to shatter it, before now anally raping her, then picked the girl up, who was still very much conscious, put her in the trunk of his car, told her he would let her live if she didn't cause any trouble, and he said that she thanked him. He drove back to the highway, even stopped for gas at one point with her still in the trunk. Pee-wee intended on dumping her out in the marsh. When he found a spot he liked, he pulled over, pulled her out of the trunk, stuffed her shirt in her mouth, bound her with clothesline, tied her knees together, looped the rope around her neck so her knees were drawn to her chin. He said he then stabbed her in the rectum with an 11-inch blade, put it all the way into the hilt, pushed the blade up inside her, started to tear it back down until it tore through her vaginal wall. Then he draped her body, still alive and conscious, across a heavy pine limb and floated her out into the marsh where she drowned. And as horrific, again, as my summary of that was, his words made it sound so much worse because he went into graphic detail about her reactions. Yeah, every little fucking bit of torture. You could tell it very much turned him on to write about it. Woo! And I'm going to share some other passages that are horrible. And you're like, well, why would you read that if you didn't read this? I assure you, whatever I read going forward, not as bad as what that passage was. One horrific thing he wrote that wasn't detailing the abuse was, I once read in a book about the Nazi death camps that the best way to get somebody to cooperate when you plan on killing them is to promise them that if they do whatever you tell them to do, they won't die. And you can take my word for it. It works. Yeah, this dude is just no soul. Just no soul at all. Pee-wee said he then found her ID when he rifled through her belongings. He would later recall her name was Leela. She was from a northern state, possibly Massachusetts. He said he weighted the duffel bag full of her stuff down with rocks, threw it out into the marsh to get rid of the evidence, and then he left to go celebrate. Drove to a truck stop, bought himself a nice steak dinner. He wrote, driving the rest of the way home that night, I played the radio real loud and sang along with it. I felt truly the best I ever remembered feeling my whole life. Oh, the bottomless inside of me had sank into the marsh with that girl. And from then on, whenever the pain came back, I knowed what to do to get rid of it. This motherfucker, just pure evil. This is why his nickname would become the meanest man in America. Before going forward, I should note that this murder will never be confirmed. And some investigators think he lied about committing this murder and all the other so-called coastal kills. I hope it was fantasy and not real life. I'll be discussing his confirmed murders, his serious murders very soon. Pee-wee wrote that he knew that in order to avoid being caught for future murders, he now planned he would have to start carrying supplies with him in a duffel bag. Couldn't just stop to buy things like he did with the first murder. He was cautious going forward. He said he never bought multiple items in one place, always purchased items outside his hometown. He wrote, there was never no doubt in my mind that I was going to do it again. Grant you, I dwelled on it sometime because I knew the law held murder seriouser than rape or burglaring or car stripping, but I figured it was worth the risk to rid myself of them spells of pain that had plagued me all my life. My only concerns was being prepared. I planned ahead real careful so as not to leave things ever again to be done on the spurs of moments. Such a typical sociopathic serial killer to frame this level of sadism as something he had to do to treat his affliction. To rid himself of spells of pain. He acts like he had this awful disease, and the only way to treat the symptoms was to torture and murder and rape random women. But if you follow his own twisted logic, that's not true. The best way to treat this illness, to cure it, would be suicide. If you have to choose between two and only two options, and option one is to kill innocent girl after innocent girl, and option two is to rid the world of yourself, then the obvious correct moral choice is two. Take yourself out. Pee-wee claimed he now spent many weekends driving along the coast, searching for places to dump future bodies. He said he found old logging roads and went deep into the swamps, chose spots with easy access from the highway. About 6 weeks after the first murder, the bothersomeness returned, and he's ready to kill again. He claimed that by Christmas 1969, he committed the first 3 of his supposed coastal kills. But again, investigators will doubt these supposed coastal kills and only focus on a different set of serious murders, some of which are also beyond fucked up. Throughout 1970, Pee-wee claimed he killed someone every 6 weeks on average along the coast. He wrote and confessed that he would pick up a girl, drive onto a trail, where he would then pull out his Beretta, warn her not to do anything stupid, to do exactly what he said. He claimed that after he handcuffed the girl, he would drive her to a spot he'd already picked out, force her to remove her clothes, and then, quote, did whatever I wanted. In his words, some of them I cut, some I burned. I ran a cable in and out of one and hung her up by it. Jesus Christ. I pumped another one full of water, filling her up until it came out of nose and mouth, but she died quick, which I hadn't expected, so I didn't do that no more. I prefer for them to last as long as possible. I took my time, and when I finished, I usually killed them the same way I did the first one, weighting them down and drowning them, taking care, killing and burying both at the same time. By October 1970, he claimed he had committed 10 murders. 1970, also the year Pee-wee began committing his serious murders. In these cases, Pee-wee knew the victims and killed them due to personal vendetta, or for money, or for sexual urges. These are the murders he will later be tried for, convicted of. Before focusing on those murders, Pee-wee claimed that he continued his coastal kills throughout the early 70s and in total killed 80 or 90 girls and young women that way. And let's again hope these were just very, very, very dark fantasies. The first of Pee-wee's so-called serious murders took place in November 1970. One of the victims, Pee-wee's own 15-year-old niece, Janice Kirby, and her friend, 17-year-old Patricia Ann Alsbrook. Janice and Patricia had both recently run away from home. Unfortunately, Uncle Pee-wee was the one to find them. And what a disturbing name for an uncle, by the way. Do you care if my Uncle Pee-wee comes over? Oh, yes, I do. I care very much. Hard no to Uncle Pee-wee. Pee-wee initially confessed that when he found the two girls, quote, they was both under drugs bad, and I started in on them about it, and we had a fight, and then I beat them to death with my fist and hand. He said he then stuffed Patricia's body into, quote, a cement pit, but couldn't leave Janice there, because, she was his niece, and he cared about her. He's not some monster. So he transported her body to Prospect in the trunk of his car, then hid her under some pine straw for 2 days, then buried her near his family home. He said he believed the girls got their drugs from a woman named Martha Ann Dix, who was often called Clyde locally because she dressed up in men's clothing. As Pee-wee later confessed, that night that Janice and Patricia Alsbrook died, I promised after it was over that Martha Ann, well, I called her Clyde, would never live a year after that. But before moving forward, Pee-wee would later confess in his autobiography that these murders occurred because he had tried to rape his own niece, and that sounds like Uncle Pawpaw Pee-wee to me. He said when he found the girls, they were both fucked up, and after he took them out to eat, his niece Janice puked all over herself. So being the gentleman he was, he offered to take the girls to his house so he could, so she could take a cold shower, clean herself up, and, get a little bit more sober. He's a great guy. He's a giver. Always thinking of others. Let's have Uncle Pee-wee share the details of his good deed gone wrong in his own words. Starting with him helping his 15-year-old niece get undressed so she could, get cleaned up. I turned on the water and started unbuttoning Janice's blouse, and Patricia Ann said, let me do that. And I smiled and said, I'm an uncle. I've been bathing her all her life. Patricia Ann shrugged, and we both finished taking off Janice's clothes and holding her under the shower. Of course, me and Patricia Ann both got completely soaked too, and in a few minutes, we was all laughing a lot. I turned off the water and got a towel, started drying Janice, who giggled and said she had to pee. I got to pause this. I love how the innocent portion of Uncle Pee-wee's behavior this day, the day he killed his young niece and her friend, is him helping a 15-year-old girl take a shower and then drying off her nude body. A girl whose friend could have done all that without him. I just don't think he was aware of how wildly fucked up doing even this is. Back to Pee-wee's account now. Patricia Ann helped her to the toilet. I said, when she's done, you all come in the bedroom. I got some spare dry clothes. They won't fit too good, but they'll do. By then I knew that even though Patricia Ann was embarrassed, she had pretty much decided everything was okay, including Janice being naked and me helping them and all. By the time her and Janice got to the bedroom, I had got my zipper case from the car and was waiting. I complained about being wet and took off my boots and shirt. Patricia Ann helped Janice lie down on the bed and put a sheet over her. Then I took off my pants and shorts and let Patricia Ann see the state I was in. And here our story takes a darker turn. The state he was in was that he had a boner. Lil Pee-wee has now entered the chat. Also, when he refers to his toothpick here in a bit, he is not talking about his dick. He's talking about his knife. He continues, one look and she started toward the door, but then I drew the toothpick and pointed it at her and told her to sit on the bed. She started to say something, but I told her just to be still and I wouldn't hurt her. I just aimed to teach Janice not to ever get so drunk again. Patricia Ann sat quiet while I turned Janice on her back and propped her legs open and took a close look and a quick taste, then laid on top of her. Janice sobered real quick and commenced to fight me, but the toothpick blade pressed against her neck settled her down. Then just as I was set to slide in and pop a cherry, something hit me in the back of the head like a mule kick. Everything went silver, then black. That motherfucker. He was going to teach his 15-year-old niece not to get so drunk by raping her. And then he becomes enraged when her friend bashes him in the head to try and stop him. And in a situation like this, if you ever have a chance to fucking bash a rapist in the head, don't just bash him once. Like, make sure they are unconscious. And you know what? If they end up dead, fucking who cares? It's self-defense. Fuck them. He says, it's probably a minute or 3 before I come to and shook out of the dizziness. I looked to see what it was that hit me, but only seen the both girls was gone. I put on my pants, grabbed my pistol and a flashlight and went after them. They was running down a dirt road toward the highway. I jumped in the car and chased them. When I got close, they ran into the woods. I got out and fired a shot in the air and yelled, stop, and they stopped. I didn't take no chances. I opened the car trunk and made them get inside. Once we was back in the house, I got my duffel bag out of the truck when I let them out, and we went to the bedroom. I shoved them both towards the bed and told Patricia Ann to take off her clothes, and she said no. So I backhanded her across the face with the pistol barrel. Her glasses went flying across the room, blood came pouring out her nose. She fell onto the bed, holding her face and crying. I told her to shut the fuck up, take off her clothes, I was gonna shoot her. And while I was putting all my attention to watching her get undressed, damn it, Janice didn't jump up and run for the door. I caught her just as she flung it open. I grabbed the pistol by the barrel, smacked her on the side of the head with the butt. She dropped to the floor. When I turned back around, Patricia Ann one headed toward me with the piece of 2x4, which I guess is what she had hit me with before, when she was aiming to hit me with again. This time I jumped out of the way, and when she swung it at me, I grabbed her hair, and I put the pistol against her nose that was still bleeding, made her drop the 2x, and marched her back to the bed. I shoved on her stomach, and handcuffed her. Then I went back and handcuffed Janice, who wasn't breathing too good. Every few seconds, her body jerked and twitched, like she's having some kind of convulsion spasms. I put the pistol down on the floor and picked her up, carried her to the bed. Then I recommenced stripping off Patricia Ann's clothes, and even though she was handcuffed, then she didn't fight me like crazy, kicking, bucking, struggling to get up. There's just no way I could hold her down at the same time, keep an eye on Janice, who I couldn't be sure wasn't possuming. Get ready to jump up and run again. And I knew right then and there that the two of them was more than I could handle, and they didn't really leave me no choice in the matter. I had to kill them both. He had to, everybody. They left him no choice. He's been a good uncle, trying to teach his niece a life lesson, and he gets attacked for it by a couple of feral alley cats. To kill them both, he tossed the girls' unconscious bodies into the trunk of his car, drove to a vacant house, tossed Patricia Ann into a septic tank he dug into, where she literally drowned in a bunch of shit. And then he took his niece back home, buried her alive behind his barn. And when people asked him if he knew what happened to the two girls he was having a meal with at a diner shortly before they disappeared, he said they got into a car with two boys from Orangeburg, about an hour and 40-minute drive to the west, and that was that. Also, before moving forward, Pee-wee maybe gets married again, around 1970 or 1971. And apparently he divorced Jerry sometime before that, maybe. His marital status gets very confusing after his first divorce. Most sources don't mention any of his wives. He'll claim he was married 6 different times before he went to prison, but he doesn't name 4 of those wives in his autobiography. Even his Wikipedia page doesn't mention any of his wives or his kids, which is unusual. Just stating this here for when he brings up a wife in one of his quotes a bit later on. You're like, who's that? Well, who fucking knows? Pee-wee claimed that he poisoned 20-year-old Martha Ann Dix, Clyde, his 3rd confirmed murder in March of 1972, and really 4th confirmed murder if you count that guy in prison, or Hazel, which of course you should. He said he did that because that he killed her because she gave drugs to Janice and Patricia, like I mentioned, but some think he did this because he was the father of her unborn child, as was rumored in the area, or at least he thought he was. He told different accounts of how he murdered her. In one interview with a newspaper reporter, he said he killed her with some kind of acid he stole from a photographer. He claimed he was inspired to use it after he heard the photographer warn, "Don't ever handle this stuff up here, it would kill you if you did." He said he poured the acid into a Coke, offered it to Martha, saying, "I gave her the Coca-Cola and she drank that and she tried to scream. She turned it up to her head and the next thing I knowed, bottle hit the floor." After she was dead, he put the body in his car and flipped her over in the ditch. In his autobiography, he told a much wilder tale, though. He wrote, "She had gone to Atlanta with her girlfriend, and when she come back, she wasn't funny at all anymore. She started off by saying in front of everybody that she's pregnant with a little Pee-wee, and that whether I married her or not, she's going to name the baby after me, Pee-wee Dix. That was more than I could tolerate. I got a feeling some of the men was thinking there truly was something between me and Clyde, and I couldn't allow that. I laughed and kidded the best I could for the rest of that afternoon. Then I told Clyde I needed to talk to her again, and she stayed around after closing time like she wasn't scared of me one damn little bit. I acted real nice. I told her I had some yellow jackets and red devils, these like pills, drugs at the time. I'd give her in exchange for one of her famous blowjobs and an ass fuck. I said that since she was telling everybody I'd done it with her, I might as well find out if she was as good as she said she was. But I didn't want to do it in the garage. I wanted to go to my place. The stupid bitch said okay, and we drove to the tenant house. I wasn't about to take no chance with her. I knew she was strong and quick. So I stayed calm and handed her a plastic bottle full of all different kinds of pills I got out of the purses of some of my coastal kills. I didn't know what they was, but Clyde did, and right off she swallowed a handful of beer. Soon she was drunk, high, buck naked, singing, dancing around the room, finally falling across the bed. I didn't especially like the idea of that, even though I knew I could take the covers off later and get them washed. When she laughed and told me to get naked, I took off my shirt. I rolled on her stomach. I snapped the handcuffs before she even knew I had them. She jumped up and commenced to cuss, and I punched her jaw and knocked her to the floor. When she started to get up, I kicked her in the face with my boot. Then I held the bottle of pills to her mouth and made her swallow every last one of them with swigs of beer. When she looked at me, I didn't have to tell her she was going to die. She knew it, but I told her anyhow. She laid there real quiet, her eyes wide, while I pinched her tits and poked and examined her privates and sniffed but didn't taste. I didn't have to... What the fuck is wrong with you? I didn't have to wait long until she was unconscious. I tried to pick her up, but she's too much for me to lift and carry, so I dragged her outside and shoved her into the back seat of the car. It's dark by the time I headed out Highway 15 toward 521. I was almost to the intersection when I met a highway patrol car, recollected how them smoky hats always pleasured themselves and stopped me for no reason but to harass me. So I turned onto the back roads and headed to a farm where I knew there was plenty of deep drainage ditches. Before we got there, Clyde had messed herself and stank real bad. I knew she was dead. What a truly complete just fucking waste of human life. This sniffed but didn't taste dirtbag was. In June of 1973, Gaskins, now 40 years old, murders 22-year-old Dorine Dempsey and her 2-year-old daughter, Robin Dempsey. Dorine was also 7 months pregnant at the time she was killed, so this fucking animal, Pawpaw Pee-wee, actually killed 2 babies this day in addition to their mom. And these are, again, confirmed murders. Some sources say Dorine needed a ride to the bus station. Pee-wee said she needed a place to stay until the baby was born. Some friends of Gaskins brought Dorine to his home. She stayed with Pee-wee before, and she thought he would be willing to help her out again. But Pee-wee was outraged when he learned that the father of Dorine's baby was black. Yeah, this dude had the gall to think he was superior to an entire race of people. This dude who wasn't superior to a fucking toilet bowl full of vomit or diarrhea. Or at least that's what he would claim at one point. While Dorine's friends waited in the car, Pee-wee said he took her behind the house. He later confessed, I was going to talk with her, and she's about 7 months pregnant at the time again. So I asked her who the daddy of the kid was. She was carrying right then, and it was another black kid from what she told me. Then he said, when you go to mixing, I don't hold with that one bit in this world. According again to one of his confessions, we went on around to the fish pond, and we walked around the edge, and I just shoved her right in the pond, and I grabbed her by the feet and held under, and then I went back and got the kid and done the same thing. Pee-wee said that after he killed Dorine, he went back, told Dorine's friends she was welcome to stay in his house. They could leave. Then he picked up little Robin, waved goodbye as Dorine's friends drove off, and then took the toddler to the pond where, said he held her under the surface for several minutes. He claimed he was not responsible for Robin's crushed skull. He said that must have happened when he put her dead body in the trunk of his car. Pee-wee would then later claim to journalists that he had lied in his confession to the police about this, that he did not actually kill Dorine and Robin because he was racially prejudiced. He explained that at first he confessed to killing them simply because he didn't have enough room for them to stay in his house with him. I mean, what was he supposed to do in that situation? Tell them that they needed to stay with somebody else? How embarrassing. He said the prosecutors didn't seem to believe that reasoning for murder. So then he lied. Said he drowned Robin because she was biracial and that he drowned Dorine for having another biracial child. And because the prosecutors were white, he said he thought they would buy that story. But Pee-wee probably lying again about his motivation for these murders to keep other people in prison from figuring out the real disgusting truth. When Pee-wee's daughter Shirley spoke to him about these murders years later, she claimed that he told her the truth. And she said she could always tell when her daddy was, telling the truth or lying. She said that his real motivation for killing this mother and child was far darker than what he confessed to. This sick fuck supposedly told his own daughter that he killed them both because he was so aroused by the toddler and he couldn't stop thinking about wanting to rape the toddler. He told Shirley he could not resist raping Robin, that he felt powerfully attracted to her. So he killed the child's mom so she couldn't stop him from what he wanted to do to her daughter. And he killed the baby because he was just that cold-blooded of a motherfucker. Dude went full evil. It doesn't really get much darker than that. Here's some of what he wrote in his autobiography about killing this mother, her child, an unborn child, and an additional warning. This might be this is one of the most fucked up passages I've read on the show. Probably the most fucked up since the Toy Box Killer. Maybe the most fucked up since the sadism he describes involves an actual toddler, but it is still somehow less disturbing than what I chose not to read earlier, because he was even more graphic with that rape and murder. I'm not gonna. I don't know if I should read this in his. I'm not gonna read this in his voice. It's too uncomfortable for me. He said Dorine said her and Robin needed a place to live until. This is his words now. Well, you know what? I should be fucking consistent. Dorine said her and Robin needed a place to live until her next baby come, which looked like it could be any time. She said she was 7 months, but she looked more to me. I told her we just didn't have enough room in our little place for her and Robin, and me and my wife and our son doll live in. I suggested she ought to go back to Charleston or to her stepmama's house in Sumter. Johnny Sellers said he had to go to Columbia later that night, so he couldn't take her nowhere. A few minutes later, he finished another beer and left. Dorine was real upset. I laid Robin and Michelle on the sofa real gentle and tucked a blanket around her. Then I asked Dorine to take a walk with me. Once we was outside, I told her that I didn't want my wife to hear, but I had a nice trailer near Roper's Crossroads where she and Robin could live rent-free. And I'd give her some money to live on, but I expected regular servicing in return. She hugged me and said she didn't know what I wanted from a big, fat, pregnant girl like her, but whatever it was, I could have it. Then we went back inside, and like we had arranged, she said she had decided to go back to Charleston on the bus and have her baby at Roper Hospital there. I told my wife I had to give Dorine $20 and was going to drive her to the bus station. Dorine and Robin and me left in the hearse. After a few miles, I drove off the main road closer to Johnsonville and Prospect and told Dorine I wanted her to get naked and give me a blowjob. And she hesitated because Robin was watching. But finally she said okay and crawled in the back of the hearse and took off her clothes, which was a real job for a girl that pregnant. Just take away all the shit he does that is illegal, and he's still a fucking monster. He continues with, and if you want to skip ahead about 90 seconds, you can avoid the worst details of this episode. Then I told her to hold her hands out in front, and I put the handcuffs on her, and she acted scared till I laughed, told her it was just part of my sexy ways. She relaxed, and I told Robin to get in the back with her mama, and I got naked, and Dorine kneeled best she could and commenced sucking. Then I reached over and picked up Robin and started taking off her clothes. Dorine stopped what she was doing, asked me what the hell I was up to. I didn't reply nothing. I just picked up the ball-peen hammer and popped her side of the head. She fell over sideways and lay still. Robin started sobbing. I held her and said for her not to worry, not to cry, because her mama was just sleeping. She got quiet. I finished undressing her and smelled and tasted of her. Then I made her take up where her mama had left off, which took a lot of forcing, but finally she did what I said. Then I lifted her up and slid her down onto me, which made her scream real loud, so I gagged her with panties and duct tape. It was like something overpowerful was pushing me into that little thing. I couldn't stop. I needed real bad to feel my dick inside her, front and back. I choked her to death when I cummed in her ass. It was the best, most overpowering cum I ever felt. Dorine was still breathing. She's too fat for me to pick up and carry, so I tied a rope around one of her legs, dragged her out of the hearse to a spot that looked soft, and I dug a grave for her and her unborn baby and put them in it. Then I cut her throat, and I covered the hole. I found a spot just big enough for Robin under a tree stump and buried her there. I told my wife and Dorine's friends and family that I took her to the bus station in Florence, and as far as I knew, Dorine and Robin was in Charleston. I never heard much about them, leastwise, the law never asked me nothing about them. Fuck. Man, this motherfucker. I should mention his autobiography, if I didn't before, not published until after he died. He fucking knew, as he mentioned in his autobiography, that if the guards and fellow inmates knew the real truth about who he was and what he had done, they would have all turned on him. Man, one would hope anyone would turn on him. That's the kind of shit, man. My brain immediately goes to like Last of Us fantasies, where it's a dystopian world. You know, I'm out, I don't know, me and a small band of survivors are walking around. We come across some motherfucker like this. For whatever reason, he feels comfortable sharing details of like the worst thing he'd done with me. And just as he starts to describe that, I just pull out a gun and just fucking shoot him right in the mouth. Or actually, you know what? That's not honest. In this situation, he starts describing that stuff. I pull out a gun and I shoot him in his knee, and then his other knee, and then his elbow, and then his other elbow. And then I don't know after that. Just gonna, see how I feel. My God. The next known Wee Gaskin's victims were 36-year-old Johnny Sellers and 22-year-old Jesse Ruth Judy, murdered in June of 1974. Previous to these murders, Pee-wee bragged in his book about a bunch more supposed coastal kills, including a pair of murders where he said he picked up 2 young teen boys hitchhiking. He thought they were girls due to their long hair, but then he found them very attractive, tied them up after sodomizing them both and apparently making them eat his ass and other things of that nature until he said he literally couldn't ejaculate anymore. He gagged them while they were still alive, cut their balls off, fried them up, made some Rocky Mountain oysters, ate them in front of them before he drowned those boys in a swamp. And you can just imagine how descriptive he got, writing about that in his book. Back to this Johnny Sellers guy now, and his ex-girlfriend Jessie Ruth, who was somebody Pee-wee had dated previously. Maybe, if you believe everything Pee-wee wrote, this tiny, fucking ugly little rat-faced hillbilly fucking douche fucked half the women in South Carolina, which I don't buy. Like he looks like a rat that somehow got bred with a human. Johnny was actually the guy who had dropped off previous victims. Or I guess like he looks like the product of a rat and human union. But anyway, Johnny was actually the guy who had dropped off previous victims, Dorine and her toddler Robin Michelle, to pop off Pee-wee's house before he brutalized and murdered them. And Johnny apparently owed Pee-wee about $1,000 for taking too big of a cut of some cars that he had stolen and given to Pee-wee to fence. Pee-wee felt Johnny had stole from him, so he invited Johnny out for a little drive to the woods, claiming he had some stolen goods hidden out there. But then when he got there, he shot Johnny dead. Then he drove back to where he'd picked Johnny up, now drove his ex-girlfriend, Johnny's ex-girlfriend, Jessie Ruth, actually also Pee-wee's ex-girlfriend, worried that she would rat on him for killing Johnny, takes her back to the same place, tells her Johnny wanted her to help him with the stolen goods. Once he got her out in the woods, out of the car, stabs her in the heart, buries both her and Johnny close to where he had killed Johnny. After claiming to kill several more people near the coast in 1974, Pee-wee returned to his serious murders in 1975. Starting with 45-year-old Silas Barnwell Yates, who disappeared on February 12th that year. Silas had left his family back in 1973, started dating a local woman Pee-wee fancied named Suzanne Kipper. When their relationship ended, Silas demanded she return all the gifts he had given her, and Suzanne and a man named John Philip Owen she was now dating hired another man named John Powell to kill Silas. Well, Powell didn't want to do the job, but he knew Uncle Pee-wee. He heard he was a man who made people disappear, talked to Pee-wee, and Pee-wee agreed to take the job. According to one source, Silas was a wealthy farmer known for carrying a lot of cash on him. Pee-wee will claim he stole $2,100 bills from his home while Yates was trapped in the trunk of the car. Pee-wee also said he was assisted by Diane Neely, wife of Pee-wee's good buddy Walter Neely. According to the Carolina Stories documentary, Pee-wee had met his criminal accomplice, Walter Neely, through a roofing job. Neely had an unspecified cognitive disability. Pee-wee thought he would be easy to control. Walter primarily helped him with his stolen car business. In between all these horrific murders, Pee-wee has constantly been stealing cars, boats, RVs, anything he thought he could fence. Just a continual fucking menace. In his Final Truth autobiography, Pee-wee said he had actually met Walter before his roofing job back in South Carolina State Prison, and that Walter was loyal to Pee-wee. He wrote, "I was his power man. Anything I asked, Walter did. And in return, I done favors for Walter to make things easier inside for him. After we both was back in the streets, I saw Walter a lot, especially after I moved to Charleston, which is where him and his wife, Diane Bellamy Neely, lived." Walter stayed with Pee-wee after he and Diane separated, and she started seeing another man they also knew from prison, Avery Howard. On the day of Silas's murder, Diane lured Silas Yates out of his house by telling him she was having car trouble. Pee-wee then kidnapped him while John Powell and John Owens watched. He then drove to Williamsburg County, South Carolina, and killed Yates there. Yates was believed to have died from stab wounds, but Gaskin said in his confession that he crushed his windpipe with a single karate chop to the throat, saying, "I was well satisfied that I killed the man with my hands." Some sources say he crushed, squeezed and crushed his windpipe. In his autobiography, Pee-wee said Yates died from having his throat slit, though. He said, "When I pulled off the duct tape, he started yelling and screaming and crying and begging and cussing, I don't know what all. He just plain making too much noise. So I hit him hard as I could, right in the Adam's apple, smashed his windpipe. That shut him up. He fell to his knees, but it didn't damage him near as bad as I thought it would, so I rammed a toothpick into his chest. It went clear through, but must have missed his heart because he didn't fall over dead when I pulled it out. So I walked around behind him, tilted his head backwards, and cut his throat. Then I knew he was dead." He claimed Diane Neely, John Parole, and John Owens all helped him bury the body. And then, after Silas was dead, Pee-wee claimed that he made Silas's ex, the woman who'd wanted him dead, Suzanne Kipper, his mistress now. This is what he said he told her. "In case your new husband didn't give you the details, I sliced your lover boy Yates' throat, and I won't hesitate a damn second to do the same thing to you if I ever decide I need to. From that afternoon on, Mrs. Suzanne Kipper Owens belonged to me." 2 months later, 24-year-old Diane Bellamy Neely and 34-year-old Avery Howard were murdered in April of 1975. Pee-wee also knew Avery from prison. We just mentioned Avery. When they'd both been incarcerated together in South Carolina, where they hadn't gotten along, apparently. Pee-wee claimed that Avery had got out of line with him a few different times, had to get his ass whooped. Then Avery got out of prison before he did, and apparently had some bad run-ins with Walter Neely, who we just met a bit ago as well. Walter, one of Pee-wee's best friends. Now Avery's fooling around with Walter's ex-wife, Diane, who we also just met earlier. Diane was the person who lured previous murder victim Silas Yates out of the house by telling him she was having car trouble. And now, according to Pee-wee, she told Avery that Pee-wee had killed Silas. And then Avery tries to blackmail him because he had heard that Silas was rich, and he thought that Pee-wee should have paid Diane more than he did for helping him lure him out to kill him. He wanted $5,000, or he was going to tell the authorities what Pee-wee had done. In another version of this story, there are almost always multiple versions when it comes to why Uncle Pee-wee killed this person or that person, it seems. In addition to Avery wanting money to stay silent about Silas's murder, Diane was also threatening to report one of Pee-wee's friends for statutory rape, and he feared, Pee-wee did, that he would also be implicated because it had occurred at his house and he was on parole still. Pee-wee said he told Diane that $5,000 was actually fair, that he should have paid her more for helping him to get rid of Silas initially, but he said he kept most of his cash hidden out in the woods around Prospect. And he told her to bring Avery, meet him near an intersection called Roper's Crossroads, we've mentioned. Then he went out there ahead of time, dug 2 fresh graves near where he had several other bodies already buried. He then had Avery and Diane follow him out into the swamp where he said he had a safe hidden inside a hollowed-out tree. Once they got there, he shot them both dead with his Beretta, spent the next half hour shoveling some dirt on top of them, and that was that. In Pee-wee's words, there's not really anything more to tell about them. The next confirmed victim, murdered by Wee Gaskins, is a 13-year-old girl, Kim Gelkins, killed in September of 1975 when Pee-wee was now 42. This is another brutal one. Pee-wee also references being newly married in 1975 for the 6th time to an 18-year-old, so that's fun. What a lucky lady. Pee-wee said that he and his wife loved to let local teens come over and hang out and party at their house. Yeah, I bet he loved that. Sometimes he said they would drive over to the coast, hang out on the beach. What a scene, right? What a wholesome scene. Just 42-year-old Pee-wee, his 18-year-old wife, and a variety of tweens and young teens frolicking around in beach shorts and bikinis. Nothing creepy about that. 13-year-old Kim was one of these teens, and soon Uncle Pee-wee started molesting her because he's Uncle Pee-wee. He also said that all these kids literally called him Uncle Pee-wee, which is so fucking disturbing. In Pee-wee's words, after a few weeks, I managed to get her to lie down next to me, and I cuddled her and touched her little titties. Then later, she let me take off her blouse and suck them. I told her that was what we was doing was all secret, and I promised not to tell nobody, and she promised. Before long, I got her to take off her clothes and let me smell and taste of her hardly head opening. But when I took out my hard dick and asked her to touch it, she said no, and she had to leave and put her clothes back on. I stayed real calm and zipped myself back up and told her I was sorry. I wouldn't do that no more. But Kim still left and didn't come around for a while. When she did, it was only if other people, especially my new wife, was there too, so I couldn't touch or taste her or do nothing, which was awful frustrating. Around Labor Day, Papa Pee-wee, told Kim he was going to Sumter to visit his daughter and grandchildren that weekend, and he wanted her to go with him. He said there was going to be a lot of people around, and he'd keep his zipper closed. Kim laughed, didn't say anything, and then he was surprised the next day when she showed up at his house, said she was ready to go. But she made him promise he wasn't going to try and do nothing to her. He promised, and then drove Kim to his mobile home, knowing his daughter and grandchildren were actually gone for the weekend. Jesus Christ. And he and Kim, and by the way, his daughter is also, around this time, will start raising his other child. So his one child will raise his second child. His one child who he didn't help raise, he's in prison most of the time during Shirley's childhood, will now raise his son. Okay. And now he's going to her house when she's gone to rape and murder a child there. He knew he and Kim would be alone there. He told Kim they were probably his daughter, at the grocery store. We'll be back soon. Pee-wee then took a shower, came out naked, introduced this poor girl to the horror that was the real Uncle Pee-wee. In his words, and this is another brutal passage, I went in the bathroom and took a shower and came out naked and grabbed Kim before she could get out of the chair she was sitting in watching television. She weren't strong. I didn't have no trouble holding her face down on the floor and getting her wrist cuffed and picking her up and laying her on the bed. She started crying. You promised, Uncle Pee-wee. But I was too busy taking her clothes off to pay much attention to anything she's saying. When I had her naked, I tasted her. Then I spread her open and fucked her cherries front and back. At that point, she felt more love-fucked and coastal, except that I knew it weren't going to end there. I came once and went out and brought the duffel from the car and got a plastic drop cloth from the pantry and spread it on the floor and laid her on it. I didn't tape her mouth. I burned and cut and plumb bum plugged her, then I sliced and carved her, and I ran the toothpick deep and twisted it. The sounds of her screams were more pleasuring than I had imagined those times when I hadn't dared take gags off of others. When I quit, she was unconscious. I slept for a while, and when I woke up, she was whimpering, barely alive, and I started in on her again. She was real sweet to live so long. It was like she knew that the longer she waited to die, the more pleasuring she would give her Uncle Pee-wee. I kissed her. I thanked her for the greatest joy I'd ever got from any coastal kill or serious murder, but she didn't seem to be listening, like it didn't matter to her. But it was important to me. I choked her to death while I corned again. The fuck? Some people, again, they just should be fucking murdered. Like, if this is read in court testimony, if he said this in court, in a perfect world, the judge is like, all right, okay, all right, we're going to call this, we're going to wrap this up, and then the judge just gets up and puts a gun to his head and pulls the trigger. All right, somebody clean this up. Jury, you can go home. Fuck this guy. It's like he was a real-life Satan. He buried Kim's body with numerous others out in the swamp near Roper's Crossroads. Now for the final two confirmed victims before Pee-wee goes back to prison. On the night of October 10th, 1975, Pee-wee killed half-brothers Dennis Bellamy, 27, and John Henry Knight, 15. They've been looking for their sister Diane ever since Pee-wee had murdered her back in April. Man, he fucking devastated this family. Both boys had worked with Pee-wee, both as mechanics in his shop, which was another income source for Pee-wee. And then also both stolen cars around South Carolina, sold them to Pee-wee to have them fenced. And once again, there's different versions of why he killed him. Pee-wee would tell authorities that he liked Johnny Knight but despised Dennis Bellamy. Hadn't liked him since back in 1971 when Bellamy had gotten drunk and started a fight at Pee-wee's house. Although he committed evil acts, Gaskin claimed he disliked excessive drinking. He once said his lack of gray hairs was due to clean living. He explained, I didn't allow people coming in my house drunk around the children. Oh, yeah, Uncle Pee-wee, all about protecting the children. On the October night he died, Pee-wee said that Dennis was drunk again, stumbled into a mud hole in Pee-wee's yard. Pee-wee told authorities, I said to myself, you made a mistake coming here tonight. He said he offered Dennis a ride in the stolen car he had just repaired. He then stopped in the woods, claiming he had to pee. Dennis went with him. Pee-wee shot him 3 times. He said later in his confession, I said if I ever had a chance to kill him, I'd kill him. And I got the chance, and I killed him. Okay. The car wouldn't crank for a while, but eventually he made it home to pick up Johnny Knight, take him back to the same location. Pee-wee said, we was just walking on the road there in the woods, and like I say, when I figured it was getting pretty close to where Dennis was at, I pulled my gun out and I shot him, and that was all there was to it. I killed him because I done killed his brother. There you go, just real fucking casual. In his autobiography, he said that Dennis stole from him and that he lured him out into the swamp near Roper's Crossroads. I play crossword every morning, okay, guys? And apparently when I see the word cross, my mind just goes, crossword puzzle? He lured him out into the swamp near Roper's Crossroads, telling him he had a barn he wanted to convert into a shop, and and he wanted Dennis's opinion on it. And when Dennis drove out with him to look at the supposed shop, he walked him out into the swamp, shot him, then told the same lie to his brother Johnny, killed him the same way. Pee Wee also claimed that his buddy Walter Neely brought these boys to him the night he killed them, and then later helped him bury them both. Fucking finally, following month, November 20th, 1975, Pee Wee gets arrested, charged with contributing to the delinquency of a minor regarding that poor 13-year-old girl he killed a few months prior, Kim Gelkins. Authorities were already suspicious he killed her and a few other locals, but they didn't have the evidence to quite prove it yet. But they could prove he had violated his parole by having her over at his house for parties where he had been witness supplying this 13-year-old alcohol. They arrested him on that charge, hoping to get him off the streets while they put together more serious charges against him. While Gaskins was in jail on that charge, plus a new car theft charge they were able to add on, authorities started to question his associates. According to Lee E. Simmons, former North Charleston police chief, the investigation revealed that a lot of people connected seemed to have dropped off the face of the earth, but there was a common thread that ran between them all. Pee Wee motherfucking Gaskins. The South Carolina Law Enforcement Division SLED was brought in for assistance, and Agent Tom Henderson was assigned to the Kim Gelkins case. Pretty soon he started talking to Pee Wee's main accomplice, an old prison buddy, Walter Neely. Henderson later told a reporter for the South Carolina newspaper The State, "We talked several times to an associate of Gaskins named Walter Neely, and he told us he didn't know anything. Finally, he said that Pee Wee had told him he'd killed some people and had his own private graveyard. Neely then broke down, revealed everything he knew. He admitted to being present when Dennis Bellamy and John Henry Knight were murdered. He led officers to their graves, claimed Pee Wee told him multiple bodies were buried there. Digging started on December 4th, 1975 in a wooded grove near a cornfield in Prospect. This is the Roper's Crossroads dump site. By dusk, the police had found 3 bodies, including Dennis Bellamy and Johnny Knight. 24 officers searched the area for more graves, and by December 6th, 2 days later, 3 more bodies have been found, including that of a woman and child believed to be Dorine Dempsey and her toddler Robin. SLED agent Thomas Henderson said, "Some of the victims were so young, you could tell they were young. And there was the baby. We all knew that we were involved in something that wasn't like anything we'd ever seen before." Over the next few days, police found the bodies of Johnny Sellers, Jesse Ruth Judy, Diane Neely, and Avery Howard. Pee Wee was charged with 8 murders. He was named a suspect in 39 other cases. Law enforcement in multiple counties began looking through their unsolved files to try and find a link to Gaskins. May 3rd, 1976, Pee Wee Gaskins indicted for 7 out of the 8 murders. Gaskins goes to trial for the murder of Dennis Bellamy in May of 1976, convicted on May 27th after a 5-day trial. Jury only needed to deliberate for 47 minutes. And then it took him only 10 minutes to vote in favor of the death penalty. Yeah, fuck that guy. Pee Wee's own family testified against him. They had heard rumors about his private graveyard in Prospect. Pee Wee's daughter Shirley testified that she saw her dad with Dennis Bellamy, Johnny Knight, and Walter Neely, October 10th, 1975. Pee Wee formally sentenced to death May 28th, 1976, but then his sentence is commuted to life in prison when the U.S. Supreme Court overturned South Carolina's death statute later that same year. Then in the fall of 1976, Pee Wee agrees to lead the police to the location of 3 more bodies in exchange for conjugal visits with his current wife. Sounds like a deal that sadistic horn dog would make. Not sure why she would still want to fuck that demon, though. Later that year, on November 4th, 1976, authorities found the remains of 17-year-old Patricia Ann Allsbrook, Pee Wee's niece's friend, in a septic tank in Sumter County. Then a young Kim Gelkins' body is found a week later in Williamsburg County, the 13-year-old girl who had called him Uncle Pee Wee. The body of a missing local man, that well-to-do farmer Silas Yates, found December 8th, 1976. Gaskins now charged with this murder. Prosecutors prepare for a second trial. April 27th, 1977, Pee Wee convicted of Silas's murder, given a second life term. Police still looking into Pee Wee's connection to several other cases, including the murder of another 13-year-old girl, Peg Catino. Peg had been reported missing back in December 18th, 1970. We have not met her yet. Her case was big news because her dad was a state legislator when she went missing. Her body was then found in Manchester Forest in Sumter County, South Carolina, 12 days after she disappeared, December 30th, 1970, and the wrong guy was blamed for her death. A guy named William J. Pierce, convicted of her murder in February of 1973. Gaskins one of 1,500 suspects in the Peg Catino case. He was questioned and released because his employer accounted for his whereabouts, but Peg was seen walking past a house where Gaskins was fixing the roof shortly before her death. In his autobiography, Pee Wee admitted, quote, "Final truth. Junior Pius did not kill Peggy Catino. I did." He claimed the court ignored him when he confessed because Pierce had already been convicted, and he was a liar. He confessed again in 1978 under some so-called truth serum. Back in December of 1970, he said he had felt that old bothersome stirring within him again. Said he was working a roofing job at the time, getting towards the end of his shift. He saw Peg, some of her friends walking past. He knew who Peg was because of her daddy, so he said hello to her, right? Because he's a nice guy, he's a gentleman. And she, quote, stuck her nose in the air like she smelled something, turned on her heels, didn't speak to me. When they was walking away, I heard one of her friends say, "Who's that?" And Peggy said, "Just white trash, can't you tell?" I doubt this is how it went down. Pee-wee said he didn't say anything back, but boy, was he pissed. He went to a club after work, nearly got into 3 fights. Next day, he picked up a hitchhiker, killed her, but it wasn't enough. He wanted to kill someone else. Couldn't get Peg off his mind. So he called his foreman, told him that he's going to be in Charleston for the next few days. Then he drove back to Sumter, parked near the Catino household. When Peg came out, he said he grabbed her, put her in the trunk of his car. Said he drove her to the barn on his rental property, raped and tortured her. In his thankfully brief words this time, "I spent a long time with Miss Peggy in the barn while I did my car work. I spread her on a work table and raped her, burned her, and did lots of other things before I killed her." Then he said he decided to dump her body where he knew she would be found. 2 days after the Yates, so who knows if he really did that though. 2 days after the Yates trial ended, the remains of 20-year-old Martha Dix, the woman he referred to as Clyde, missing since 1971, were found in Sumter County at the spot where Gaskins said he'd buried her. More bones found in the following days, and Gaskins' wife would tell authorities that her husband had probably killed Martha because she had threatened to report that he had raped her. I wonder how many other women in South Carolina that fucking animal raped. On April 18th, 1978, Pee-wee admitted to a total of 13 murders, pled guilty to 7 of them, plus a burglary. He received 8 consecutive life sentences, because he'd only actually been found guilty of 2 murders previously. Prosecutors agreed to the deal because they wanted to clear up the remaining murders and arrest any accomplices. Gaskins gave a 4-day, 331-page confession to solicitor Kenneth Summerford that month. He confessed to killing the 8 people buried in Prospect and 2 additional murders in Charleston. Those victims have never been found. There were multiple instances where Summerford accused Gaskins of lying, then Pee-wee dared God to strike his mother dead if he wasn't telling the truth. Pee-wee said, "Why, if I wasn't telling the truth, why'd I take you down there this morning and give you another body?" When asked if he ever regretted any of the murders, he said he regretted killing his niece and Jessie Judy. "I reckon really down deep, when you get to the bottom of it, why, you have a little feeling towards everybody regardless of what. Going down deep, when you get to think about it, why it still gets on your nerves and your mind about it." Did that animal really ever truly feel bad about the evil she did? I don't think so. Might have thought about it. Worried about people's judgment. But I doubt he felt actual remorse. I don't think he's probably capable of that. Gaskins also told 12th Circuit solicitor Kenneth Summerford they'd like to keep dynamite in case he wanted to blow somebody up. So Summerford replied, "Well, you must have had somebody in mind when you bought the dynamite." And Pee-wee admitted, yeah, there were 3 or 4 people he considered blowing up, including his wife and mother-in-law. I hope his wife was done with conjugal visits by now. Pretty sad if she still showed up to let this animal fuck her after everything he'd been convicted of doing and after he admitted he'd thought about blowing her and her mom up. Yeah, he just gets a little fired up. He says things. Sometimes he does crazy things, but I love him. He's got a good heart. Gaskins had thus far still managed to escape capital punishment, despite everything he had done. But he will eventually find himself back on death row when he accepts a murder-for-hire job from within prison. This is the fucking craziest murder he committed, based on how he pulled it off. Uncle Pee-wee blew 23-year-old Rudolph Tyner the fuck up inside of Tyner's cell September 12th, 1982. This is highly documented. Tyner was on South Carolina's death row because of a March 1978 double homicide he'd committed. He'd been convicted of robbing a convenience store in Murrells Inlet, killing the owners, a married couple, Bill and Myrtle Moon, March 18th. He was appealing a sentence at the time of his death. Well, the couple's adopted and now adult son, Tony Simo, wanted Tyner dead. He didn't want to wait on any appeals. So after doing some poking around, he's able to hire Gaskins to do it for $2,000. He asked Gaskins what he needed to kill Tyner, and Gaskins told him he wanted as much of a stick of dynamite as he could get. And let's actually hear from Pee-wee now, since Pee-wee recorded some of these conversations, which will come back to bite him in the ass.
I come up with something, it can't be no damn making sick on end. I need 1 electric cap and as much of a stick of damn dynamite as you can get.
Okay, well, I'll probably get at least a plastic explosion.
Well, that'd be good.
Well, that'd be good. God. He sounds like so fucking harmless. Pee-wee, can you cut these 4 people's heads off? Well, I reckon I could. If you could just give me a sharp sword or axe or something, that'd probably do just fine. I'll be happy to. Is that the voice you were expecting? Pee-wee then asked Tony to insert the C4 plastic explosive inside the heel of his shoe, mail it to him. He did. Gaskins' job as a maintenance man in prison allowed him to obtain elements the master tinkerer needed to make a bomb. He got a hold of a radio speaker to create what looked like kind of like an intercom, and told Tyner, who he had befriended leading up to this, that the 2 men could use this creation of Pee-wee's to talk to one another while they were in their cells. Because Tyner's cell, the back of it butted up against the back of Pee-wee's cell. So he made this little intercom type device. You know, he's real fucking good with mechanical stuff. And he fed part of it through a vent into Tyner's cell. And then Pee-wee said of this device to Tony,
I'll take a damn radio and rig it into a bum, and when he plugs that son of a bitch up, it'll blow him on into hell.
And he wasn't kidding. Once it was through the vent, Pee-wee told Tyner to hold the receiver up to his ear so they could, test it out, make sure that it worked. Gaskin then detonated the bomb by plugging his end of a wire that ran into the receiver, which had C4 and a blasting cap inside of it, into a power outlet. Pee-wee later said, the last thing he heard was me laughing. Cold-blooded. Authorities found part of the speaker embedded into Tyner's head. Almost all of his fingers had been blown off, some of them blasted far out of his cell, and just blood was everywhere. Pee-wee was evil, he was ignorant, but he was not stupid. Before the murder, Pee-wee's daughter Shirley had gone to the police, or the prison authorities, told them that her dad was planning on killing somebody inside, but they said it was impossible to do that. It was too secure. They weren't worried about it. After the blast, Gaskins immediately flushed the wire that was still in his cell, part of this device, down the toilet, then pretended to be just as confused as the other prisoners, and he might have gotten away with it, but the police found a recording that you just heard of Pee-wee's phone calls with Tony hid in his cell, and he had made this recording because he wanted to blackmail Tony for more money down the road. Tony Simo, now also charged with murder. He'll plead guilty to a lesser charge, be sentenced to 8 years in prison, and then granted parole after less than 4 years served in 1986. March 26, 1983, a jury sentenced Gaskins to death for the murder of Rudolph Tyner after a 6-week trial. It was actually the first time a white man had been sentenced to death for killing a black man in South Carolina. Gaskins appealed to the jury for mercy, saying he had never handled any explosives despite testimony from another inmate who said Pee-wee ordered him to deliver a bomb to Tyner's cell. Gaskins said, I am guilty of participating in it, but I was not in the final preparations. I don't know how they received the explosives into the prison, but I did not get it. Yeah, the receiving end of this little device, he had another prisoner hand to Tyner before he fed the wire to his cell. It kind of looked like a cup. Anyway, he also claimed he confessed to several other murders, even though he was innocent, to avoid the death penalty in 1978. He said, I'm guilty of some of them, I admit that. I've not been a good man. But he claimed he was tricked into pleading guilty because prosecutors aimed or promised not to seek the death penalty. After the trial, officials were asked how they could prevent another murder like Tyner's, and Deputy Solicitor Dick Harpootlian said giving Pee-wee Gaskins the death penalty, that's probably the best way to make sure explosives aren't smuggled in. And if Dick's name sounds familiar to you, well, you probably have a great memory. That's the same dude who defended Alex Murdaugh. We covered Alex's crimes back in episode of 377. During his final years on death row, Gaskins would tell the police he could lead them to a new body every few months, but that was just some bullshit he did to try and escape. He did hire someone to help him escape, but the attempt luckily failed. The police would never find any more bodies. 1990, Pee-wee started working with author Wilton Earl on his autobiography, Final Truth. I don't know how Earl stomached so much of that. He gave over 120 hours of confessions to over 100 murders. At the time of publication, it was one of the only sources out there about Gaskins' life and crimes. It was not published until May of 1992, since Earl had promised Gaskins he would not release it until after Pee-wee's death because it is so fucked up. Pee-wee was allegedly paid for this book and told his family, they want a juicy book, so I'm going to give them the juicy book. In a publicly released statement, he said, I hope that maybe I'd give enough information so that some families can make the connections and know what happened to their girls, mostly, and boys, some. Enough information for them to go to the law and identify who I was talking about. Maybe they'll even find a few of the corpses. Man, what a swell guy. He just wants the parents to receive closure. The autobiography was presented as a truthful account of Gaskins' life and murders, but as mentioned, authorities have found no evidence to corroborate many of his confessions in it. For example, Pee-wee claimed he killed 14-year-old Jackie Freeman A Minnesota girl he said he picked up near Columbia, South Carolina in October of 1973. Claimed he handcuffed her, sexually assaulted her, literally ate parts of her body before he cut her throat and buried her in Prospect. But we don't know if that girl ever existed. Authorities believe that he was lying. Co-author Wilton Earl said, if there was a Jackie Freeman, then there are family members of Jackie Freeman in Minnesota and friends of Jackie Freeman, and they deserve to know what happened to her. Officials from Minnesota said they had no records of missing person reports based on names, and the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children said they could not come up with a link to any missing Jackie Freeman. Pee-wee claimed he led police to Freeman's body, but told investigators the remains were his niece, Janice Kirby. Janice's dental records were lost, causing further doubt that the remains were truly hers. The police faced criticism from some for failing to be aware of the information presented in the book. SLED official Hugh Munn said, Pee-wee was very unreliable for the truth. We're confident we've got all the bodies. We're very satisfied there was not a Jackie Freeman. He acknowledged that dental records were misplaced, but when the remains were dug up, they found a nearly perfect set of teeth, and the agent was convinced it was Janice Kirby's skeletal remains. On September 6, 1991 now, the devil died. Wee Gaskins executed at the age of 58. Shortly before he was brought into the death chamber, Gaskins vomited up a razor blade he had smuggled into death row in an attempt to kill himself, but was not successful. My God, that dude was crafty. In his final appeals, Pee-wee argued his confession was obtained by trickery and he shouldn't have been used to convince a jury he deserved the death penalty in the case of Rudolph Tyner. For the past 12 years, Pee-wee had been working with defense attorney Grady Query, who described him as intelligent, polite, and completely unremorseful. He said Pee-wee admitted to and then attempted to justify every murder in which he was accused of in the days leading up to his execution. He was a true sociopath. The only rules he acknowledged were his own. And if you broke his rules, your life might be the price. Pee-wee was a killer apparently devoid of conscience. Hell yeah, he was. Uncle Pee-wee, old Papa Pee-wee strapped to the electric chair at 1 a.m. His final words, pretty anticlimactic. He said, I'll let my lawyers talk for me. I'm ready to go. Electricity was turned on at 1:04 a.m., turned off at 1:06, and he was pronounced dead officially at 1:10. Spectators cheered as his body was driven away. Gaskins' lawyers released a statement after the execution saying, I'm ready to go. Where I'm going has to be better than where I've been. And you know what? In fairness to him, the sociopathic sadist was brutalized a crazy amount of times growing up. The serial rapist might have been raped more often than he raped others. Florence County Sheriff Billy Barnes witnessed the execution. His dad had arrested Gaskins for the first time when he was 13. Sheriff Barnes arrested him for the last time in 1975 during the Kim Gelkins investigation. So that's pretty cool. Barnes told the press he didn't think Gaskins knew where more bodies were buried. Gaskins wrote a letter the day before he was moved to the death house saying he'd actually only killed 5 of the 16 that most people thought he committed at this time now, even though he wasn't convicted of 16 murders. I hope most of his murders just talk, based on the horrible shit he claimed. He wrote to Holly Gatling, former reporter for the State, as you know, I've always been straight with you, and as this will probably be my last letter, I want you to know that I'm the man who killed Rudolph Tyner on death row. I'm not guilty of several of those I was accused of. And as you and I have been friends so long, I want to tell you that I'm guilty of 5 that I was accused of, and here's the ones which I did. Avery Leroy Howard, Diane Bellamy Neely, Denny Bellamy, Johnny Knight, Barnwell Yates. In 2 of these cases, I didn't mean to kill those. That was being Johnny Knight and Barnwell Yates. As to the others, I had nothing to do with their deaths, and some I had no idea that they was dead. When I killed Dennis Bellamy, I was fighting for my own life, and in that process, my gun went off, striking Johnny Knight in the back of the head. I didn't even know he was hit or dead until I shot Dennis Bellamy several times. And as I always have said, I was saying to my death, I didn't mean to kill Barnwell Yates, as all I was supposed to do was get him off for John P. Owens. But after I got him to the place and he saw John Owens, he knew he's in bad trouble and ran over me trying to get away. And I hit him in the throat, like I said in court. And I mean to kill him, but I feel I did, even though he stabbed also. And that night, all I had on myself was a flashlight and a pistol, so in no way could I have stabbed him, period. As to Dennis Bellamy, I did kill him, and I'm sorry for it today. And if I had to do it over again, I think I'd jump out of the truck and run to not have done it. I should have done it that night, but didn't. As to Avery Leroy Howard and Diane Bellamy Neely, I should have told them to go right ahead and tell the law whatever they wanted to, that if they did, it'd make them accessories to the crime also. But I wasn't thinking straight in those days as I am now. Barnwell Yates Yeah, that was apparently Silas Yates' nickname. Just going to add that to the cast of characters. Uncle Pee-wee, also known a.k.a. Pawpaw Pee-wee, Poss, Marsh, Hinnant, Yulee, Fanny, Slick Duck, Hazel, the baddest man in South Carolina, Uncle Dewey, and Barnwell. Pee-wee's daughter, Shirley, said her family didn't bury Pee-wee when they were given his body after his execution because they had heard that people into the occult were waiting to steal his corpse because they truly believed he was the devil's son, and they wanted to perform rituals with his remains. So she had him cremated instead, spread some of his ashes out in the swamp where he used to like to hide. She said that Pee-wee loved being way out in the swamp where it was full of snakes and spiders and other creatures that scared most folks. When she asked him if he was afraid of all the snakes and spiders and such, she said he told her, not one bit. He said that they should be afraid of him because I'm the most dangerous creature out in that swamp. He wasn't kidding. That fucking monster really was the meanest man in America.
Good job, soldier. You made it back. Barely.
Man, what a crazy-ass tale. In the end, Donald Henry Pee-wee Gaskin Jr. was convicted of 10 murders, but who knows how many people he really killed? Or how many others he raped? How many people he stole from? How many fires he set? And I say 10, but really 11, I guess. Sources are all over the fucking place with this guy as far as like kills. But 10 and then the one from prison earlier on, Hazel. So really 11. But who knows? Who knows how many people he killed, how many people he raped, how many people he stole from, how many fires he set. His daughter Shirley said her dad never said he was sorry for killing anybody. She added, I think he was born to kill. I really do. I think he was sick. My daddy always, ever since I can remember, loved to kill something. She also thought her dad was telling the truth when he once claimed to her that he killed 105 people. Long before he was caught, he was feared by damn near everyone in the area around Prospect. Of course he was. People were nervous around him. But a lot of them didn't think he was an actual serial killer. He constantly said crazy shit, so much that everyone thought he was just a dude who said crazy shit all the time. They didn't realize he was often telling the truth. And I don't really have any more thoughts on the guy. Dude was heartless, going back to when he wasn't even yet 12 years old. You know, back when he was participating in the gang rape for friend's sister. Back when he was confused why that upset her. When he said, but even though we didn't hit her, do nothing to hurt her, she still cried and begged us to stop. Motherfucker truly had no empathy, possibly from birth. He was a monster before all the times he was raped himself in prison. And that's maybe the scariest part of his story to me, that somebody as awful as he was could have been born that way, which we have come across those type of stories before, but man, they always fucking shock me. Time now for the takeaways.
Timesuck Top 5 Takeaways.
Number 1, Pee-wee Gaskins claimed he didn't know his legal name until he stood before a judge for the first time. Before then, he knew himself as Junior Parrot or just as Pee-wee due to his small stature. Number 2, in September of 1969, Gaskins claimed to have committed the first of what he called his coastal kills when he said he traveled up and down the highway looking for female hitchhikers. Once he had them in his vehicle, he said he took them to remote areas where he raped, tortured, and murdered them before disposing of their bodies in the marsh. He claimed he killed between 80, 90 people this way, admitted to horrific acts of both torture and cannibalism, also claimed he killed 105 people total to his daughter. Number 3, Gaskins also confessed to multiple so-called serious murders involving people he knew. The victims included family members, business associates, a pregnant woman and her toddler, young teenage girl, thought of him as Uncle Pee-wee. Authorities had evidence to corroborate these crimes and found multiple bodies buried not far from Pee-wee's residence in Prospect, South Carolina. Number 4, Gaskins was ultimately executed for the murder of fellow inmate Rudolph Tyner, who was on death row himself for murdering an elderly couple. The couple's son felt the appeals process was taking too long, took matters into his own hands by hiring Gaskins to kill Tyner. Gaskins constructed a radio bomb that killed Tyner instantly. Pretty ingenious, but he failed to cover his tracks and was quickly linked to the murder. The number 5, new info, just some other possible additional murders. The following, just some additional murders Gaskins confessed to that the police did not charge him with due to a lack of evidence. 1972, Pee-wee moved to Charleston, South Carolina's biggest city. One day, one of the men who brought him some stolen cars from out of state came to his work, which was surprising because they weren't supposed to be seen together. But he wanted Pee-wee to meet a young man he had shared a cell with at the county jail in Augusta, Georgia. He was also involved in selling stolen property, and he thought they could do some business together. So Pee-wee was introduced to 24-year-old Eddie Brown, what we called a real big motherfucker. Pee-wee and Eddie hit it off. Eddie was into stealing. Eddie was not into selling stolen cars, but stolen weapons. Eddie soon introduced Pee Wee to his wife, Bertie, and Pee Wee liked both of them so much he invited them over for dinner on several occasions. Pee Wee put the word out that he bought guns, no questions asked, for the right price. He then sold those guns to Eddie. Pee Wee started hanging out at bars near the Naval Base, Air Force Base. We put out that he was looking for military weapons for collectors. Guns came flowing in. It was good business for him and Eddie until Eddie was picked up by ATF for questioning. Agents then seized approximately 100 rifles being loaded into a truck at Sullivan's Island, South Carolina, and Eddie was linked to them because his truck driver snitched on him. Eddie then called Pee Wee, said he needed to buy more guns so he could raise enough cash to hire a good lawyer, once he sold them. He worried that it was only a matter of time before the Fed showed up at his place with a warrant. He asked if he could have a $3,000 advance, or he could give, a $3,000 advance to Pee Wee if Pee Wee could help him. Pee Wee said he was happy to do so, no cash up front, but he didn't want it to deliver the guns in Charleston. He wanted to do it out in the country. Guessing you can see where this is headed. Eddie agreed. They actually agreed to meet at Pee Wee's rural house at the time, which was out near Sumter, in 2 days' time. Eddie showed up with his wife, Bertie. Pee Wee said, "The way Eddie talked, it was purely plain to me that he weren't near as tough as he made out to be, and I knew that my decision made spur on the moment when he first called and told me about the feds was the right decision." He told the couple that the guns they wanted were in the barn, and he let them over, and then as soon as they were all inside, picked up a rifle and opened fire. He said Bertie was injured but not killed, so Pee Wee slit her throat before he buried both their bodies. He said that killing them was a matter of necessity. He knew that once the feds charged Eddie, he was going to snitch, and he couldn't have that happen. Another alleged victim was 40-year-old Horace Jones, who Pee Wee called a horse's ass. Horace was recommended to Pee Wee by a prison associate. Horace had served time twice for larceny, cashing stolen Social Security checks. Pee Wee had allowed Horace to stay with him for a little while and showed him around the Charleston area. One day, Pee Wee had to make a business trip to Florence, was gone for 3 days. When he returned, his wife told him that Horace tried to rape her. She fought him off, but then he raped 2 friends of hers. And Pee Wee was furious, but maybe not for the reasons you would expect. He wrote, "Not so much him trying to fuck my wife, but the way he went about doing it. I mean, if he had come straight to me like a man and asked to make a deal with me for my wife, I would probably have give her to him for a night or a week or to keep, if the offer were good enough." I feel like I should be shocked by that, but I'm not. Of course, he treated his wife like Poss used to treat him back in juvie. He felt he couldn't just beat up Horace and throw him out because it would offend Pee Wee's criminal connection, so he decided Horace had to die instead. He drove to a remote area to find a spot to dig a hole, then went back to pick Horace up. He said he knew 2 women who would be perfect victims for a financial scam. Horace ran against elderly people. Instead, he drove Horace out into the woods, pulled his gun, forced him out of the car, made Horace walk to his own grave, sit down in it, and then shot him 3 times.
Timesuck Top 5 Takeaways.
Serial killer Pee Wee Gaskins, meanest man in America, has been sucked. Thanks to the Bad Magic Productions team for helping making Timesuck. Thank you to Queen of Bad Magic, Lindsay Cummins. Thanks to Logan Keith helping to publish this episode. Designing merch for the store. Got new merch in there at badmagicproductions.com. Thank you to Olivia Lee for the wonderful research. Also, thanks to the All Seen Eyes moderating the Cult of the Curious private Facebook page. Mod Squad, making sure Discord keeps running smooth. And thanks to everyone over on the Timesuck subreddit and Bad Magic subreddit. And now let's head on over to this week's Timesucker updates.
Updates? Get your Timesucker updates.
Before I read any updates, just know that this episode was recorded before last week's Russia's terrifying cyborg against the West came out. So that's why none of these updates are related to that episode. I am positive I'll have updates from that episode shared next week. First up, something silly from a silly sucker, Mark from Kansas. Mark sent an email into bojangles@timesuckpodcast.com with the subject line of Dick the Bruiser. Dear Suckmaster, after listening to your Delphi Murders episode, I thought you might be interested in a small fact. Dick the Bruiser was my dad's godfather. I'd always thought he'd made it up, but one day I asked my grandma and she confirmed it. Well, my dad is absolutely the kind of person to be full of shit. My grandma would never. We're talking about a woman so prim and proper that she demanded you go in the bathroom to fart. How in the hell she would ever have met old Dick Bruiser, I have no idea. But given how she behaved at wrestling matches, he never smartened her up to it being a work. As an aside, here is my worst Cummins Law moment for your entertainment. I was out jogging, listening to the R. Kelly episode, when I saw an attractive redhead walking her dog. I quickly started scanning for a ring and found a bare finger. I slow my pace a little, flash a smile, get a smile in return. I start crossing over near her to strike up a conversation when suddenly I hear, "Our years are far apart, and I'm inside your butt." At which point I erupt in laughter. Her seemingly interested smile suddenly drops. She starts rapidly moving away from me, realizing I was now a certified victim of that son of a bitch Dan Cummins. I just kind of shook my head and moved on, leaving her alone. I jogged along that road for months afterwards. Never saw her again. 3 out of 5 stars. Wouldn't change a thing. Mark from Kansas. Mark, thank you for sharing something funny. Love that your grandma was close with Dick Bruiser. Interpret that how you will. Maybe she hooked up with old Dick Bruiser. Sorry I blew it for you with that redhead. She's probably still telling her friends that she narrowly escaped from that run with her life. Next up, some inside info on the recent Delphi murder suck from a meat sack who wishes to remain anonymous. They sent in an email with the subject line of, "Richard Allen looks like a gnome." Hey there, Dan the Man and the whole Timesuck fam. It's my first time writing in here, so I hope I sent it to the right place. Oh, you sure did. Hopefully the subject line caught your attention. I just wanted to write it and share my experiences with that shit stain covered in the most recent episode, the Delphi murders. When I saw the name of the episode, I had a rush of emotions. Excited because I love the show and anxiously await new content every week. Thank you. Intrigued at what new info I would learn, and angry because that piece of shit Richard Allen negatively affected my life. I'm going to apologize for the length of this email because there's a lot I would like to say, as well as expound on some of the info you shared during the podcast. I was a correctional officer at Westville Correctional Facility for a while and had to actually interact with this dick. He was housed under protective custody in the administrative segregation unit of the facility, which is in the maximum security unit. This means that he was in a one-man cell for approximately 23 hours a day. He was given the opportunity to go to an isolated recreation yard for an hour several times a week, which he usually refused, and also offered a shower several other times each week, which he also tended to refuse. The first time I ever saw him, I was shocked at how small he was. Wearing his prison jumpsuit, he literally looked like a garden gnome without the stereotypical pointy hat. When we moved the prisoners in the unit, they had to be handcuffed while in their cell, searched, and escorted by 2 officers to the next secure location. One officer physically escorts the prisoner. The second officer stands behind and holds a 6-foot lead attached to the handcuffs. This is intended to prevent the prisoners from overpowering the guards and escaping. When we had to escort Allen, there was a minimum of 3 personnel, 2 in the aforementioned positions, and a third several feet behind them with an active video camera to record everything that happened or was said from the time the cell door opened until he was secured again. The first time I had to escort him, he tried to talk to me like we were old friends. I ignored it, told him to approach the cell door, put his hands through the cuff port to prepare for movement. He then looks at me through the door's window and mumbles, "You don't have to be so mean. I already apologized for killing those girls." Took everything in my power to not to walk away at that moment. After escorting him to medical and back to his cell, I just felt dirty despite having worn gloves for the entire interaction. I scrubbed my hands until they were raw. This was the beginning of months of similar interactions with him. We are trained to treat every prisoner equally regardless of why they are incarcerated. I would be lying if I said that was easy to do. But I will say that I never, not once, saw anyone do or say anything harmful towards him. Due to the sensitive nature of his crime, it was still in court then, he was under 24/7 suicide watch, so someone was at the door of his cell at all times when he was in it. We were told not to speak to him, not to react to anything he might say to us. We just had to record it in the log and report anything pertinent to our superiors. I listened to this man confess multiple times. I had to touch him when escorting him. I had to hand him food to eat in his cell. And then I had to go home to my family and pretend everything was perfectly fine. It really started to negatively affect my mental health. I couldn't compartmentalize dealing with murderers at work, then coming home and playing with my kid or spending quality time with my wife. Every time I went to work, I contemplated joining the Kurt Cobain School of Abstract Art in the parking lot. But I couldn't do that to my family, so eventually I left that job. After that, my life got much better, and I don't regret my decision to leave at all. Now on to some of the info mentioned in the podcast. When we are working in the maximum security unit, we are required to wear stab vests. Imagine the Hollywood bulletproof vest, and you've got the general idea. These are issued by the DOC and remain at the facility. You sign one out at the start of your shift and return it at the end. It is highly unlikely you will get the same vest multiple days in a row. Nobody put patches on them, and even if they wanted to do so, there was nowhere to put them on. Sharing personal information such as religion, political stance, and other things was frowned upon because that could be seen as potentially showing favoritism towards a group or an individual and causes a whole host of issues. This puts Allen's claims of COs wearing Norse pagan patches or saying they were Odinists in question. Next up is his mental and physical health. I personally witnessed him refuse multiple meals and also refuse to go to sick call. He would instead demand that the nurse come to his cell. One nurse can't do a house call when there are 200 plus inmates to take care of. The combination of him refusing to shower for weeks at a time, skipping meals frequently, and refusing to attend sick call when called obviously began to take its toll. Short of dragging him from his cell, hosing him down, and shoving him food and meds down his throat, there wasn't much we could do except observe and report. There are some observations, however, that you really shouldn't report. But those stories are for your other podcast. Ooh, some paranormal stuff. Please send them in. I don't remember him having much of anything in his cell, no personal effects, artwork, mail, etc. And I don't remember him ever having a visitor of any kind, personal or legal, while he was at Westville. It might have happened on another shift, but I don't remember seeing it in the log on the unit. As with everything I've mentioned, that was my experience. There were 3 other shifts, and I can't speak for them, but I never witnessed or saw evidence of mistreatment. There's much more that I'd like to say, but I'll leave it at that since I've already taken up a lot of your time. I've listened to every episode of Timesuck and Scared to Death, and for the first time in my life, I look forward to Mondays. Thanks for making my work week run more smoothly. 3 out of 5 stars. Hopefully the chick finally submits, and if not, what is big deal? Maserati, Bugatti, spaghetti, mother. Anonymous Beat Sack and former CO. P.S. If this were somehow to make it on the show, please give a shout out to any current or former officers at Westville who listen to the podcast, especially those working the U. You guys are the real unsung heroes, even though most people will never know what goes on behind the wire. Well, thank you, Anonymous Sack, for those awesome details and other info you sent in to me that you didn't want me to read. That was very kind. I love inside info like this. It's very hard to get that from dicking around on the web, watching docs, reading books and reports. I truly appreciate you taking the time to add to the info I shared about those tragic murders with anybody who happens to be listening. So hail Nimrod. And now more inside info from RT Sack, Anya Mahler, who sent in an email with the subject line of Duped by Shen Yun. Dear Suckmaster Dan, first off, gosh heck, you're a funny dude. Great big thanks for you being you. Your ability to turn even the darkest of tales into intelligent, witty, and hilarious stories is something I very much love. I've been a huge fan since your early stand-up. Sci Live once, no big deal. And I'm all in on your podcast. Timesuck is my absolute fave. As an architectural color consultant, that's very cool. I spend a lot of time driving, and your stories make my commutes between projects fly by. Well, thank you. What a fucking cool job you got. And also, very much appreciate the jobs that COs do, if I didn't mention that. Okay. I've listened to you all these years, and this is the first time I felt compelled to write in and tell you about my Shen Yun experience. I live in Seattle, a city bursting with arts, culture, diversity, and overpriced coffee. And I spent my whole life enjoying plays, music festivals, and all kinds of performances. Yeah, Seattle's great. I started noticing the Shen Yun ads years ago, all those vibrant colors, twirling dancers, catchy buzzwords like spectacular and a must-see. Naturally, I was hooked. I asked around and ended up convincing 12 of my closest peeps, including my parents, best friend, her family and parents, to go see the show. We were all pretty excited to see what it was all about. The first half was exactly what the ads promised. Beautiful costumes, hundreds of dancers, giant immersive screens. It was like stepping into a kaleidoscope of color. Then it got weird. A guy came out and sang some very strange stuff. I slow head turned to my husband and mouthed, "What the fuck?" We went into intermission, and that's when things took an even stranger turn. During the break, a Shen Yun usher with a clipboard started asking my husband very personal questions about his job, hobbies, and family. Felt like they were trying to recruit him for something. Maybe a subscription to more weird shows. Whatever it was uncomfortable. He tried to escape, but the usher kept going until he finally had to say, "But the bell rang." In my head, I imagined the way Ralphie said it in A Christmas Story. Then the second half happened, the tone shifted dramatically, and suddenly we were learning about organ harvesting, religion, the Chinese government, and Falun Gong. I won't go into more details because you and the New York Times person covered the rest of the weirdness perfectly. After the show, I just stared at my 12 friends and fam and felt like I had lured them into a cult. I had to apologize to all of them. They still bring it up, by the way. And I felt even more duped by the money we'd all given them. In my defense, none of that was mentioned in the ads, buses, or billboards. Who knew I needed to background check a dance show? Anyway, thanks for the laughs. Keep up the great work. 3 out of 5 stars. Wouldn't change a thing. Praise Bojangles. Glory be to Triple M and hail Lucifina. And most of all, cheers to you, Dan. Sincerely, a much wiser fan, Anya. Anya, that's so nice. Yeah, thank you for the kind words, first of all. And holy shit, your email made me laugh. You're very funny. I love that everybody you took to that show still give you shit for it. Like, what the fuck was that? Why did you take us there? But you're right. Who would think they had to do recon for a show that looks like it's just a theatrical show centered around, beautiful imagery and dance, that revolve around Chinese history and culture. I love that it was exactly as ridiculous as I was hoping it would be. Thank you for taking the time to share that inside info with us all. Very cool. Thanks to everybody who sends in the messages every week.
Thanks, time suckers. I needed that.
We all did.
Well, thank you for listening to another Bad Magic Productions podcast. Scared to Death and Timesuck each week. Short Sucks and Nightmare Fuel on the Timesuck and Scared to Death podcast feeds twice a month. Please don't do just about anything Wee Gaskins did. Just at all. If you're about to do something, anything, and you think, this reminds me of something Uncle Pee-wee would do, stop. Go to a quiet place. Sit down. Don't bother anybody. And just keep on sucking.
Bad Magic Productions.
And now, very exciting news. A recent sponsor has some new menu items that he would like to share with you. Hello, it is me, Yuri Putin again. Founder and manager, but not owner because I do not believe in private ownership of the Department of Good Physical Health Condition Division of Sustenance Dwelling, Yuri Putin's Glory of Mother Russia Digestion Nibbles. We have much more food items for you to enjoy, comrades of strong health. Please, sample at your pleasure. Our poultry squares of protein for strength to destroy Western evil, and also thick gelatinous liquid with flavor of mustard and also honey, or sour but also sweet for magnificent but not flashy like bourgeoisie taste. So full of communal power. Also, we now have Soviet cheese meat nourishment plus additional Soviet cheese meat nourishment added with 2 rectangular thin crunch pork provisions still held in solidarity by strong Silas cobra bread. If it is strong, Soviet nourishment for ability to dismantle lies of evil capitalist dirty little piggies, you come to the right place when enter respectfully and full of love for Ponyboy Putin and Russian strong heart. The Department of Good Physical Health, Condition Division of Sustenance Dwelling, Yuri Putin's Glory of Mother Russia Digested Nibbles. See you there. We have so much communal food enjoyment to partake in.